Introduction. The power of psychology in modern sales. Psychology has transformed the way businesses relate to their customers. In the world of modern sales, it's no longer enough to offer a quality product or service. It's essential to understand how the human mind works in the purchasing decision-making process. Every interaction with a customer is an interaction with their emotional system, their perceptions, their previous experiences, and a series of mental biases and shortcuts that guide their behavior, most often unconsciously. Therefore, mastering psychology applied to sales isn't about manipulation. It's about communicating more effectively, respecting human nature, and generating value on both sides of the transaction. When a person stands in front of a product, their brain processes much more information than they consciously recognize. For example, when entering a physical store or visiting a website, the customer is not only evaluating the price or the product's features, but also how they feel in that environment, how trustworthy the brand seems, what emotions the design, colors, background music, or the service received evokes. This happens because the human brain is constantly evaluating emotional signals. Does it make me feel safe? Can I trust it? Do I feel understood? These questions, although rarely expressed out loud, guide most purchasing decisions. A clear example of how perception influences purchasing decisions is seen in the simple act of choosing a coffee. Two coffee shops may offer exactly the same coffee quality, but if one has a welcoming atmosphere, with warm colors, soft music, and service that makes the customer feel special, the customer is much more likely to be willing to pay even a higher price for the same beverage. It's not the coffee itself that costs more, it's the emotional experience associated with it. The perception of value is built in the customer's mind long before they even pay. Emotions play a central role at every stage of the purchasing process. In fact, numerous neuromarketing studies have shown that most consumer decisions are first made emotionally and then justified rationally. This means that, although a customer may explain that they chose a product for its durability or the savings it offers, ultimately, the initial decision was influenced by how that product made them feel. A well-known example of this is in the automotive industry. Many people choose a car not only based on its technical specifications, but also on how they feel when they see it, when they imagine themselves driving it, when they project themselves into the image that vehicle represents. A sports car may be impractical compared to a budget sedan, but it evokes feelings of status, freedom, and power, and those emotions often outweigh rational data. Therefore, in modern sales, the salesperson who understands the power of emotions focuses not only on the product, but on what the product means to the customer. A telephone is not just a communication device. It can be a work tool, a symbol of modernity, or a way to express the user's personality. A simple change in the way a product is presented can make a difference. Instead of listing technical features, you can show how the product solves an emotional problem or improves the daily life of the person who purchases it. The human brain also uses mental shortcuts known as cognitive biases. These biases are energy-saving strategies the brain uses to make quick decisions without analyzing all available information. For example, the scarcity effect makes a product seem more valuable if it's perceived as limited, while the anchoring effect influences price perception depending on the first price shown. These reactions are automatic and universal. They don't depend on the customer's educational level or experience, as they are part of the natural architecture of the human mind. Understanding these processes allows us to present offers and messages in ways that resonate more deeply with the customer, without the need to manipulate or deceive, but rather by aligning communication with how the mind truly works. However, using psychology in sales entails a great ethical responsibility. Trust is one of the most valuable assets in any business, and once lost, it is difficult to regain. Therefore, applying psychological techniques must aim to offer a genuine benefit to the customer, never taking advantage of their ignorance or vulnerability. For example, if the principle of urgency is used by offering a limited time promotion, it must be genuine and not a false scarcity created solely to pressure the purchase. Otherwise, it can generate a sense of deception that, sooner or later, damages the brand's reputation. Successful and sustainable sales are built on relationships of trust, and trust is only achieved when the customer perceives honesty and consistency between what is promised and what is delivered. An example of ethical sales based on psychology is the case of companies that offer free trial periods. The psychological objective of this type of strategy is to reduce the customer's fear of making a bad decision, but at the same time, the company has so much confidence in its product that it allows the customer to experience its benefits risk-free. If the product is good and the customer perceives value, the purchase is made with a sense of satisfaction, not pressure. These types of practices demonstrate that psychology applied to sales is not about manipulating the mind, but rather facilitating a decision-making process in which both parties win. Another important aspect is that the use of psychological techniques requires self-awareness and training on the part of the salesperson or sales team. It's not about memorizing persuasive phrases, but rather understanding human behavior. For example, a salesperson who understands the importance of empathy can detect a customer's emotions and adjust their pitch accordingly. If they sense insecurity, they can reinforce testimonials from other users to build confidence. If they sense enthusiasm, they can highlight additional emotional benefits. This flexibility is achieved by understanding that behind every purchase is a person with unique motivations, their own fears, and specific expectations. In everyday practice, this means that every customer touchpoint must be designed with the emotional experience in mind, from how a message is responded to on social media to how the product is delivered. Every detail counts, because every detail communicates. A bad experience, even a small one, can outweigh many positive aspects. Therefore, when applying psychological techniques, the total impact of the purchasing experience must always be considered. But before continuing, please share your audiobook in the comments below, and if this message resonates with you, give it a thumbs up and share it. This way, you'll be sure not to miss any content that nourishes your mind and brings you closer every day to the life you truly deserve. There's no time to waste. Now, let's continue. Technique 1. The principle of reciprocity. Reciprocity is one of the most powerful principles in the psychology of sales and human relations in general. Its foundation is simple, yet incredibly effective. When someone receives something of value, they feel an almost automatic impulse to return the favor. This response is not only cultural, but deeply human. It's hardwired into our brains as an evolutionary mechanism that has enabled cooperation and community building over thousands of years. In a sales context, this means that when a company or salesperson gives first, unconditionally, and genuinely, the customer develops a positive predisposition that significantly increases the likelihood of a future purchase. A very illustrative example of reciprocity can be found in something as mundane as receiving a free sample. Imagine walking into a store and a salesperson, with a genuine smile, offering you the chance to try a new product with no obligation. There's no pressure, no demand for an immediate purchase, just a gesture of courtesy. Immediately, the customer's brain triggers an unconscious response: I've been given something, I must reciprocate in some way. Even if the customer doesn't feel obligated, there's a natural tendency to show gratitude, and often that gratitude translates into a purchase. Large supermarket chains have understood this for decades. A small free sample can increase a product's sales by up to 200% in a single day. But reciprocity goes far beyond handing over physical samples. Giving can mean many things. It can be providing valuable information, offering free advice, providing exceptional service, or even sharing advice that helps the client solve a problem even if it doesn't involve an immediate sale. For example, a financial advisor who takes the time to explain to a potential client how to better organize their budget, without demanding an immediate contract, is sowing a seed of trust. When that person decides to invest or hire a financial service, they will remember the person who first helped them without expecting anything in return, and are highly likely to become a client. A true story that illustrates this principle is that of a small family restaurant that decided to change its approach to welcoming guests. Instead of just handing out the menu, they began offering a small, free appetizer while customers waited for their order. This inexpensive gesture generated such a strong, positive emotional experience that customers not only began returning more frequently, but also increased their average check, ordering more dishes, and recommending the restaurant to their friends. This initial, simple yet sincere gesture created a feeling of gratitude that directly translated into increased sales and customer loyalty. The power of reciprocity is also reflected in the digital realm. Many companies offer quality free content such as guides, templates, or how-to videos. These types of contributions, when delivered without strings attached, build a relationship of trust with the audience. For example, a software company that offers a free tool to solve a specific problem, albeit a limited one, creates a positive perception among users, who, when they need a more comprehensive solution, will first consider that company to purchase a paid version. The key is that the value delivered must be real, useful, and perceived as genuine, not a mere sales pitch in disguise. Now, giving first doesn't mean giving away everything or jeopardizing profit margins. Well-applied reciprocity is about strategy, not charity. The key is identifying what kind of value can be offered that has a high emotional impact for the customer, but a reasonable cost for the company. For example, a fashion retailer can give away a small accessory with the first purchase. Its cost may be very low compared to the margin on the main garment, but the emotional impact on the customer will be high, because they will perceive they have received more than expected. The important thing is that the gesture has an element of surprise and genuine generosity, avoiding the appearance of a purely commercial gimmick. The psychology behind this phenomenon is explained by the fact that human beings feel discomfort when they perceive a social imbalance. If someone receives a favor, help, or a gift, the brain registers a kind of moral debt that it seeks to balance. In a sales environment, this debt isn't necessarily repaid in cash or with an immediate purchase. It can be repaid with a recommendation, a positive testimonial, or future preference over a competitor. Therefore, even when the initial benefit doesn't translate into an instant sale, reciprocity creates long-term emotional capital that strengthens the relationship between the customer and the company. An example of how to maintain reciprocity without affecting margins is the freemium model, widely used in digital applications and services. This model offers a free version with limited features, but enough to generate real value. Users benefit without paying and develop a positive perception of the brand, which increases the likelihood that, when they need advanced features, they will be willing to pay for the premium version. This achieves a balance. The customer receives initial value without risk, and the company maintains its profitability by converting a percentage of these free users into paying customers. Reciprocity can also be applied to everyday communication. A salesperson who listens attentively, who offers helpful advice even when they don't close a sale, is giving their time, attention, and knowledge. These intangible gestures create a more human and less transactional relationship. Customers often remember the experience of feeling heard and valued more than the product itself. In a saturated market, where many salespeople are only looking to close a quick sale, those who demonstrate generosity and patience have a significant competitive advantage. Furthermore, reciprocity not only occurs between salespeople and customers, but also within the work team. An environment in which colleagues help each other generates a cooperative effect that is also reflected in customer service. When an employee receives support from their colleagues, they tend to replicate that behavior with customers, creating a virtuous cycle of give and take that benefits the entire organization. Ultimately, the principle of reciprocity teaches that the first step to selling more isn't always asking, but giving. A simple gesture, an unexpected detail, a genuine attention can open doors that no expensive advertising campaign could achieve on its own. The key is that this giving is authentic, relevant, and sustainable. Companies that apply this principle ethically not only close more sales, but also build lasting relationships, generating customers who don't just buy once, but return, recommend, and become brand ambassadors. And that, in the long run, is worth far more than any individual transaction. Technique 2. Smart price anchoring. Price anchoring is one of the most powerful psychological strategies, yet one of the simplest to implement in any business. Its operation is based on a very basic principle of human behavior. People rarely know exactly how much a product or service should cost, so their minds look for an initial reference point against which to evaluate any offer. That reference point, known as the anchor, can be the first price they see or hear, and once it's established, all other evaluations revolve around it. This means that the price you present first can, without the customer even realizing it, influence how they perceive the value of your product and whether they consider what they're paying expensive or cheap. Let's consider an everyday example. Imagine you walk into a tech store and see a high-end TV on display priced at $5,000. Right next to it is another TV with slightly lesser features priced at $2,800. In absolute terms, paying almost $3,000 for a TV may seem like a lot, but compared to the $5,000 model, it suddenly feels like a reasonable deal. The customer's mind isn't evaluating the absolute value of the $2,800 TV, but rather comparing it to the anchor the salesperson placed first. In fact, if that $2,800 TV stood alone, without the more expensive one next to it, the customer would likely perceive it as too expensive. Anchoring, then, not only influences price perception but also willingness to pay. Fashion companies use this principle constantly. It's common to see an exclusive designer garment with a very high price tag at the store entrance, while seasonal styles are offered at a lower price. That first garment, which few will buy, serves a specific function. It establishes a mental anchor. After seeing it, any other price seems more accessible. Even luxury brands use anchoring to justify high prices across their entire product line, creating a perception of exclusivity and status that translates into a greater desire to purchase. Anchoring isn't just applicable to physical products. It's equally effective in services. For example, a marketing agency might offer 3 plans: a basic plan for $500, a standard plan for $1,200, and a premium plan for $3,500. In many cases, the company's real goal isn't to sell the premium plan, but rather to use it as an anchor so that the standard plan, which is the most profitable for them, is perceived as a great opportunity. The customer automatically compares, thinking, "I don't need to spend $3,500. $1,200 is more than enough," and feels they've made a smart decision, when in reality, their perception was influenced from the start. The key is that the first price the client sees or hears determines the frame of reference for the entire negotiation. In a direct conversation, a salesperson may present the most comprehensive or most expensive option first, not to pressure, but to establish a standard of value. For example, an insurance agent might say, "We have a comprehensive plan that covers absolutely everything, with an annual premium of $1,200. Then, by presenting a mid-range plan with sufficient coverage at $800, the client perceives this as a logical and economically sensible alternative. If the order were reversed, that is, if the $800 plan were presented first and then the $1,200 plan, the perception would be different, and the more comprehensive plan might seem unreasonably expensive. Now, how do you make discounts feel more valuable? This is where another fundamental aspect of anchoring comes in. When presented with an original price and then a discounted price, the customer's mind focuses on the difference, not the absolute final cost. Seeing a product labeled was $100, now $70, generates a stronger sense of savings than simply seeing the $70 price without any reference. This principle is so powerful that even small discounts can seem significant if the anchoring is well established. A widely used example is online stores that display the original price crossed out next to the discounted price. The psychological impact of the previous price makes the discount perceived as an immediate and tangible benefit. The perception of value can also be reinforced by using percentages instead of absolute amounts, or vice versa, depending on the amount. A $50 discount may sound modest on a $1,000 product, but saying 50% off your second unit creates a greater emotional impact. On the other hand, for low-cost products, talking about concrete figures can be more effective. Save $2 on each unit can be more persuasive than saying, save 10%. Choosing how to present the discount based on the context is crucial for the anchor to fulfill its purpose. Even the language and the way visual information is displayed reinforce the anchoring effect. For example, a restaurant may list the most expensive dish on the menu first, not because it's the best-selling item, but because it primes the customer's mind to think the other options seem more affordable. This not only increases the average check, but also improves the perception that the restaurant offers reasonable options compared to that initial high price reference. Similarly, e-commerce website designers often list the most expensive or best-selling products with a high price tag first, because they know that initial anchoring influences the buyer's final decision. Anchoring can also work with bundles or packages. Instead of selling a single product, you can create purchase options where one has a clearly high price to establish the frame of reference. A classic example is software subscriptions, where a monthly version, an annual version, and a premium version with exclusive benefits are offered. Although most users choose the annual version, this perception of savings occurs because the mind compares the 3 options and feels it is getting the best value for money. Without the premium option anchor, the decision might have been skewed toward the monthly plan, reducing profitability for the company. It's important to clarify that price anchoring must be applied ethically and consistently. Manipulating false prices or inflating the initial cost just to make a discount seem attractive can have the opposite effect: loss of trust and reputation. Transparency is key. The anchor must reflect a real and justified value. When the customer perceives honesty, the positive impact of anchoring is multiplied because they feel they are making an informed and advantageous decision. Finally, anchoring is more than a sales technique. It's a strategic communication tool that directly influences value perception. It's not just about how much a product costs, but also how it's presented and the order in which information is presented. Once you understand that the first number a customer sees can completely change their perception, you can design your pricing strategy, discounts, and offers to maximize purchase readiness without lowering your margins or engaging in price wars. In essence, well-implemented anchoring is the difference between selling a product for what it's worth in the customer's mind and selling it for what the label simply says. Technique 3. Social proof and real testimonials. Social proof is one of the most influential principles of psychology applied to sales because it taps into a deeply human behavior: the tendency to follow others when we're not entirely sure what decision to make. When a person sees that others have made a similar decision and achieved positive results, their mind automatically reduces uncertainty and generates a sense of security. Simply put, if other people have already bought it and are satisfied, it's very likely that I'll buy it too. This mechanism is so powerful that it manifests itself in almost every aspect of life, from choosing a restaurant full of diners over an empty one to deciding which book to read because it's on the bestseller list. An everyday example of social proof is seen in the digital world with product reviews. When a potential buyer visits an online store and sees that a product has hundreds of positive reviews and comments from satisfied customers, their level of trust skyrockets. Even if they've never interacted with that brand before, validation from other consumers acts as a mental shortcut. If so many people recommend it, it must be good. Conversely, a product with no reviews or low ratings generates distrust, even if the price is lower or the features seem attractive. This is why e-commerce giants like Amazon prominently highlight the average rating and customer testimonials. They know that each yellow star is a psychological lever that pushes them toward a purchasing decision. Social proof is also the reason why many brands use popularity figures in their communications. Phrases like more than 10,000 satisfied customers, market leaders in 20 countries, or number one in sales for 3 consecutive years not only inform, but also persuade. Customers interpret these figures as signals that the product or service has already been validated by a large group of people. This reduces the perceived risk and reinforces the idea that the choice is safe. Even in physical environments, social proof has an immediate effect. A store with a line of people waiting generates more curiosity and trust than a completely empty one. Real testimonials are one of the most effective tools for building this social proof. It's not just about saying your product works, but about demonstrating it through the experiences of other customers. A well-structured testimonial should convey authenticity and concrete results. For example, it's not enough for a customer to say, "I liked the product." Ideally, they should explain how it solved a specific problem or how it tangibly improved their life. "This software helped me reduce my project management time by 30% and allowed me to serve more clients in less time." The more detailed and measurable the testimonial, the greater its impact on perceived value. The power of testimonials isn't limited to text. Photos and especially videos from real customers generate an even stronger emotional connection because they show genuine expressions, tone of voice, and emotions that are difficult to fake. A service business, for example, can include short interviews with customers on its website who share their experiences, directly demonstrating their satisfaction. This not only builds trust but also humanizes the brand by putting real faces behind the buying experience. On social media, this type of content has an even greater reach, as other potential customers can see comments, share them, and interact with them in real time. A famous example of the application of social proof occurred with a well-known cosmetics brand that launched a new facial care product. Instead of investing heavily in traditional advertising, they sent free samples to 100 social media influencers, who shared their experience with thousands of followers. In less than a month, sales exceeded initial expectations. What happened here is simple. These people acted as social validators, building trust among their audiences. People didn't just see an ad, they saw someone they trusted recommending the product. This demonstrates that, in the digital age, social proof is exponentially amplified when integrated with influencer marketing strategies. Another classic use of social proof is the success story section on corporate websites. Companies that showcase completed projects, achieved metrics, and testimonials from enterprise clients generate an immediate perception of strength and effectiveness. For example, a software company that publishes a case study in which it helped a company increase sales by 50% using its platform not only demonstrates results but also inspires other potential clients to visualize the same success for themselves. This technique is especially powerful in B2B sales, where decisions often involve high investments and greater risk analysis. However, it's important that social proof be authentic. Fake testimonials, inflated figures, or purchased reviews can have the opposite effect and damage a brand's reputation. Today's consumers are more skeptical and know how to identify when a testimonial seems scripted or unbelievable. Therefore, honesty and transparency are key. If a product isn't yet selling well, you can work with simpler social proof, such as showcasing the team behind the company, the manufacturing processes, or the brand's values. Even something as basic as showing positive social media interactions or early genuine reviews can be more effective than fabricating non-existent popularity. A creative way to generate social proof without waiting for large customer volumes is to offer a referral program. When a satisfied customer recommends a product or service to a friend, they are transferring some of their personal trust to the brand. This recommendation is extremely powerful because it comes from someone they trust, not a corporate advertisement. In fact, studies show that recommendations from well-known people have a much higher conversion rate than any other form of advertising. Therefore, incentivizing current customers to share their experience with symbolic rewards can multiply the customer base without massive advertising investments. Using numbers can also reinforce social proof. Phrases like, more than 50,000 downloads in the first week, preferred by 7 out of 10 industry professionals, or the highest-rated product of the year according to consumers, generate an instant validation effect. It's important, however, that these numbers are backed up by real, verifiable data to maintain trust. People are naturally skeptical of overly generic claims, but when concrete data is presented, the impact is immediate. Ultimately, the principle of, if others buy it, I will too, isn't about negative social pressure, but rather about harnessing the natural tendency to seek reassurance from the decisions of others. When a business can demonstrate that its product has been validated by real people, that it has delivered tangible results, and that others have trusted it before, potential customers feel confident and reduce their fear of making a mistake. Therefore, building a solid foundation of testimonials, reviews, and success stories isn't a luxury, but an essential strategy for selling more and, at the same time, for building long-term trust and reputation. Technique 4. Scarcity and ethical urgency. Scarcity and urgency are two of the most powerful mental triggers in sales psychology because they tap into a basic principle of human behavior. When we perceive something as limited or potentially lost, its value automatically increases in our minds. This reaction is no coincidence. It stems from thousands of years of evolution where scarce resources represented survival. In the modern consumer environment, even if scarce resources aren't vital, the brain still responds the same way. If a product is scarce or the time to obtain it is limited, we feel the need to act immediately. A classic example of scarcity is limited editions. Fashion, technology, and collectible brands have used this strategy for decades. When a company announces that a product will only be available to the first 500 people or that only a certain number of units will be manufactured, it automatically awakens a more intense desire in the consumer. It's not just about wanting the product, but also about not wanting to be left out of something exclusive. Apple, for example, has masterfully handled this with some initial product launches in reduced quantities, generating lines of people waiting even before stores opened. That feeling of, if I don't get it now, I'll miss out, becomes a powerful driver for immediate action. Urgency, on the other hand, focuses on the time factor. A discount that lasts only 24 hours or a promotion valid while supplies last generates an automatic impulse to decide quickly. This mechanism works because the brain, faced with a limited time window, reduces procrastination and eliminates the need for excessive analysis. Suddenly, what could be decided tomorrow becomes an action right now. For example, airlines constantly use this strategy by displaying messages like, only 2 seats left at this price, or offer valid for the next 12 hours. The goal isn't to deceive, but rather to present real information that motivates action. However, applying scarcity and urgency requires ethical management. Some companies fall into the trap of creating false scarcity, such as displaying a permanent, last few units message when inventory is abundant or inventing deadlines that are never met, such as the famous timers that reset every time a customer visits the website. These practices may generate sales in the short term, but they destroy long-term trust. Ethical scarcity means communicating the product's real limitations, such as limited production due to quality issues or promotional deadlines that are actually expiring. Ethical urgency involves offering special conditions that are effectively time-limited, but without resorting to deception. An inspiring example of well-utilized urgency is a small artisan bakery that produces only a certain number of loaves per day due to its manual manufacturing process. Instead of hiding this, it communicates it openly. Our loaves are hand-baked in small batches. Only 100 loaves per day to ensure freshness. Reserve yours before noon. The result is that its customers became accustomed to planning their purchases early, and even making reservations in advance. This not only increased sales but also created a sense of exclusivity and added value for the product. Here, scarcity wasn't artificial. It was a natural consequence of the quality and the work method. The words used to convey scarcity and urgency are crucial because they must generate action without sounding aggressive or manipulative. Phrases like limited edition, only one batch available, valid until Sunday, maximum quota of 20 people, special price for today only, or last units in stock work because they convey a clear and actionable message. The important thing is that the language is perceived as informative and not as excessive pressure. Instead of saying, buy now or miss your chance, which can sound threatening, it is more effective to use a positive tone like, take advantage of this offer before it ends. This shift in language creates urgency while maintaining a pleasant shopping experience. A creative use of urgency can be seen in live events or scheduled launches. For example, an online training business might announce that it will open registration for a course for only 5 days a year. This limited window motivates those interested to act immediately, avoiding the typical, I'll sign up later, procrastination. Once registration closes, the company keeps its promise and does not accept new registrations until the next date. This not only improves the conversion rate but also reinforces the brand's credibility because it demonstrates consistency between what it communicates and what it does. Scarcity can also be applied by targeting certain groups. For example, a retailer might offer an exclusive benefit to the first 50 customers who sign up for a new membership, or an e-commerce site might offer early access to a collection only to mailing list subscribers. These types of strategies not only generate quick sales but also build loyalty, as customers perceive they receive preferential treatment for being part of a select group. It's important to keep in mind that scarcity and urgency don't always apply to physical products or direct discounts. They can also be applied to the customer experience. A clear example is popular restaurants that don't accept reservations and only serve on a first-come, first-served basis. The wait itself creates a sense of exclusivity. If so many people are willing to wait, it must be worth it. The same logic applies to live events with limited capacity, VIP concert tickets, or special edition autographed book launches. In all of these cases, the perception that only a few will be able to access increases the desire to purchase. The ethical use of scarcity and urgency not only generates immediate sales, but can also increase the perceived value of the brand. Customers who manage to obtain a limited product or access an exclusive promotion feel they've achieved something special, and that excitement translates into long-term loyalty. They are more likely to recommend the brand and return for similar opportunities. In contrast, a company that uses false urgency may achieve a momentary sale, but risks losing the customer forever if they feel deceived. Ultimately, scarcity and urgency are powerful tools for accelerating purchasing decisions, as long as they are used with honesty and respect for the customer. Applied well, they transform indecision into action, generate excitement, and strengthen the brand's positioning as a reliable and transparent leader. In a market saturated with options, these strategies, executed ethically, can make the difference between a customer who indefinitely postpones their decision and one who acts immediately, feeling confident and satisfied with their choice. Technique 5. The Brand Halo Effect. The halo effect is a psychological phenomenon that profoundly influences how customers perceive a brand and its products. It's a kind of mental shortcut where our overall impression of a company, product, or person affects our evaluation of all its other attributes. In other words, if a customer's first impression is positive, they'll automatically tend to assume that everything related to that brand is also positive. This bias can be a powerful sales tool, because a single well-executed detail can create a chain of favorable perceptions that directly translate into greater trust and, therefore, more sales. A simple example is product packaging. Imagine 2 bottles of wine, one with a plain label and a low-quality cork, and another with an elegant design, meticulous typography, and a professional-looking cork. Even before tasting the wine, most people will assume the second bottle is of higher quality, even if the contents are the same. That first visual impression creates a positive aura that influences everything else. Flavor perception, willingness to pay a higher price, and even the likelihood of recommending it. That's why brands invest so much in design, presentation, and initial experience, because they know that initial perception can tip the entire purchasing decision in their favor. This effect is also seen in customer service. If a customer receives exceptional treatment from their first contact, their perception of the company changes radically. Let's say a customer walks into a store and an employee greets them with a genuine smile, calls them by name, and offers personalized help without being intrusive. This experience creates such a strong positive aura that, even if there is a minor error with the product later, the customer is likely to be more tolerant and maintain a favorable opinion of the brand. On the other hand, if the first impression is negative, everything that follows will be scrutinized, and the customer will look for flaws where they may not even exist. Big brands know that the halo effect can multiply sales because a single initial detail generates a widespread expectation of quality. Apple, for example, has built much of its success on a carefully crafted halo effect. The impeccable design of its products, the minimalist packaging, the in-store experience, and the ease of use of its devices create an impression of excellence that extends to everything else they release. Even people who have never tried certain brand products assume they must be of good quality simply because everything else they've seen from Apple conveys that sense of innovation and prestige. For a small business, generating a halo effect doesn't require huge budgets, but rather attention to detail. It can start with something as basic as the cleanliness of the premises, the personal presentation of the sales team, or the speed of response to an online inquiry. Every point of contact with the customer is an opportunity to reinforce that positive initial impression. For example, a small appliance repair shop that delivers clean equipment with simple yet neat packaging can generate the perception that its work is more professional and reliable than that of a competitor who delivers products carelessly. This difference in perception can be decisive in driving the customer to return and recommend the service. The halo effect also extends to digital marketing. The first time a potential customer visits a business's website or social media, they form an immediate opinion in a matter of seconds. A slow page, with a cluttered design or low-quality images creates a negative halo that can affect the perception of all products, even excellent ones. Conversely, a clear page with a professional design and useful content creates a positive halo that predisposes visitors to trust more, stay longer, and ultimately purchase. Therefore, taking care of the brand image in the digital environment is not a luxury, but a necessity for any company that wants to take advantage of this psychological effect. Another key aspect is brand consistency. If a company projects a premium image, its products, customer service, and marketing messages must align with that perception. For example, it wouldn't make sense for a gourmet food store to use low-quality, generic packaging or for its staff to provide careless service, because that breaks the positive aura that could be generated by the promise of exclusivity. Consistency is essential because it reinforces the initial impression and prevents the customer from experiencing dissonance. That is, a contradiction between what they initially perceived and what they later found. Language and tone of communication are also part of the halo effect. A brand that communicates clearly, using a professional and empathetic tone, generates a perception of seriousness and commitment. On the other hand, a brand that makes spelling mistakes in its messages or responds in a cold and mechanical manner can generate a negative halo that affects the perception of the quality of its products or services. In a world where customers share their experiences on social media, a single negative comment can spread quickly, so taking care of each interaction is vital to building and maintaining a positive halo. The impact of product design and user experience cannot be overlooked. If a customer perceives a product as well thought out, with details that make it easier to use and enhance their experience, they automatically assume that everything the company makes is designed with the same quality and care. This not only increases sales of that particular product, but also increases the likelihood that the customer will purchase other products or services from the same brand. The halo effect generates a kind of automatic loyalty based on first impressions, and that loyalty can be more powerful than any discount or promotional campaign. A very illustrative real-life case is that of a small coffee shop that decided to invest in improving its overall ambience and presentation, from menu design to background music and drink presentation. Before this transformation, the coffee shop had a steady but limited flow of customers. After improving the initial visitor experience, not only did coffee sales increase, but so did sales of other products such as desserts and complimentary foods. Customers began to assume that everything the place offered had to be as good as the first impression they received upon entering. This is the power of the halo effect, which directly affects perception and purchasing behavior. Ultimately, building a positive image from the first contact is an investment with multiplied returns. Every initial interaction, every visual detail, every attentive gesture generates a ripple effect that can tip the balance toward closing sales and customer loyalty. Once a positive aura is established, Even small mistakes tend to be forgiven because the customer already has a favorable predisposition toward the brand. Therefore, deliberately working on that first impression, from corporate image to customer experience and product design, is not just a matter of aesthetics, but a fundamental strategy for increasing sales and consolidating market trust. Technique 6. The Rule of 3 Key Benefits. The Rule of 3 Key Benefits is based on a very powerful psychological principle. The human mind tends to remember and process information presented in small groups more clearly, especially when it's reduced to 3 essential elements. This is due to the so-called working memory, which has a limited capacity and, when saturated with too much data, creates confusion and resistance to action. Therefore, simplifying your sales message to 3 key benefits not only makes it easier to understand, but also significantly increases the likelihood that the customer will take action. When a salesperson tries to communicate 10 reasons why their product is the best option, they risk losing the customer's attention because their mind wanders and they can't retain enough information. However, by focusing on 3 compelling and well-structured benefits, they manage to generate a clear, direct, and memorable message. This doesn't mean the product only has 3 benefits. Rather, the salesperson selects the 3 most relevant to the customer's need at that moment. This approach creates clarity, eliminates distractions, and reinforces the perception that the purchase decision is simple and obvious. A common example is found in the automotive industry. A car salesman could talk for hours about all the vehicle's technical features, from engine type to dashboard design. However, what really matters to the average buyer can be summarized in 3 main benefits: safety, fuel economy, and comfort. By presenting the car by highlighting these 3 points and explaining how each improves the customer's life, the message is simplified and a compelling narrative is created. For example, this model provides maximum safety for your family with its advanced braking system, helps you save money with efficient fuel consumption, and provides comfort with its ergonomic design. 3 clear, direct, and memorable benefits. The psychology behind this technique is linked to the concept of fluid cognition, which is the ease with which the brain processes information. The easier a message is to process, the more trustworthy and attractive it is perceived. Therefore, simple and structured messages tend to generate more trust than messages loaded with technical data. A sales pitch that is perceived as easy to understand reduces customer mental friction and positively predisposes them toward purchasing. Using 3 benefits also has an emotional component. It's not just about conveying hard facts, but also about connecting each benefit to a specific customer emotion. For example, a management software program might present its 3 benefits as follows. It saves you time by automating repetitive tasks, gives you peace of mind because all your information is protected, and helps you increase your revenue by optimizing your processes. Each benefit connects with an emotional desire: time freedom, security, and financial growth. When the customer can visualize how these benefits directly impact their life or business, the purchasing decision becomes much easier. In the field of digital marketing, this rule is reflected in the most effective sales pages. Instead of overwhelming visitors with endless lists of features, 3 key benefits are highlighted with icons or images that make them easy to understand. For example, an online learning platform might structure its value proposition like this: learn at your own pace from anywhere, receive internationally recognized certifications, and access an exclusive community of experts. Visitors can quickly understand the proposition and decide if it's relevant to their needs. Another example is business presentations or sales pitches. When an entrepreneur only has a few minutes to convince an investor, they don't have time to discuss all the technical details of their project. Instead, they focus on 3 major benefits: the problem it solves, the positive impact it generates, and the potential return on investment. This approach not only facilitates understanding but also generates a greater emotional and rational impact on the listener, increasing the chances of achieving the desired result. Simplicity not only helps you sell more, but it also improves the post-purchase customer experience. When customers easily recall the 3 key benefits, they also remember why they made the decision, which reinforces post-sale satisfaction and reduces buyer regret. This phenomenon, known as cognitive dissonance reduction, is essential for building loyalty and recommendations. A customer who is clear about what they gained from their purchase is much more likely to become a brand advocate. To successfully apply this technique, the salesperson must know their product and their customer well. Not all benefits are equally important to everyone. Therefore, before choosing the 3 key points, it is necessary to listen to the customer, identify their main needs, and select the benefits that will have the greatest impact on their decision. This requires empathy, preparation, and the ability to adapt the sales pitch in real time. The language used is also critical. Each benefit should be presented in short, punchy sentences, avoiding unnecessary technical jargon. For example, instead of saying, "Our product uses advanced processing technology with optimized algorithms," you can say, "Our product is faster, more reliable, and easier to use." 3 simple words that encapsulate the real value without complicating the message. The power of simplicity and clarity in sales communication is demonstrated not only in consumer psychology studies but also in practical results from companies of all sizes. Those that have adopted short, direct messages have seen significant increases in conversions, not because the product changed, but because the way it was presented made it easier for the customer to understand its value. In a world where attention is limited and information is abundant, reducing the message to 3 key benefits is not only an effective sales technique, but a strategic necessity for any business that wants to stand out. Technique 7. Listen more, sell better. Listening more to sell better is one of the most undervalued yet most powerful skills in the sales world. Many people believe that selling is about talking non-stop, listing features, repeating benefits, and trying to convince the customer with endless arguments. However, the reality is that the best salespeople are those who know how to listen attentively, because only by truly listening can we uncover the customer's true needs and offer solutions that generate authentic value. Active listening is not simply about hearing what the customer says, but about understanding the meaning behind their words, their emotions, and their expectations, creating a bond of trust that opens the door to a long-term relationship. Customer psychology is clear. People like to feel understood. When someone truly listens to us, we feel valued, respected, and more willing to trust. In the context of sales, this means that a customer who perceives that the salesperson is listening attentively will be much more open to considering the proposal presented. Conversely, if a salesperson constantly interrupts, talks only about themselves, or offers rushed solutions without understanding the problem, the customer feels like they're just another number on a list, and that perception is often the beginning of rejection. A simple example. Imagine a customer walks into a store looking for a cell phone. A traditional salesperson might start by saying, "This is the newest model, has the best camera, all-day battery life, and it's on sale." However, the customer might be looking for a phone for their teenager, and their biggest concerns are parental controls and shock resistance. If the salesperson doesn't listen first, they're likely to end up offering a product that doesn't meet their real needs. Conversely, a salesperson who asks and listens might uncover key details such as the device's primary use, the customer's budget, and durability concerns, leading them to offer a much more accurate and value-based solution. Active listening involves several techniques that go beyond simply remaining silent while the customer speaks. One of them is reframing, which involves repeating in your own words what the customer said to confirm that you understood correctly. For example, "So, if I understand correctly, what you're most concerned about is that the product is easy to use and has fast technical support. Is that correct?" This simple action has an immediate effect. The customer feels that their words matter and that they are being understood. Furthermore, reframing prevents misunderstandings and allows the salesperson to confirm information before making any recommendations. Another fundamental technique is the use of body language and nonverbal communication. Maintaining eye contact, nodding your head, avoiding distractions like looking at your phone, and adopting an open posture convey genuine interest. The customer notices these details, even if they don't verbalize them, and adjusts their emotional disposition accordingly. A customer who feels heard lowers their defenses and is more willing to speak honestly about their true needs, even those they hadn't initially considered mentioning. A very effective practice is the use of open-ended questions. Instead of asking, "Are you looking for this type of product, yes or no?" the salesperson can use questions like, "What is most important to you regarding this type of product?" or "What has been your previous experience with this service?" Open-ended questions invite the customer to talk more, share relevant information, and reveal deeper motivations that might otherwise go unnoticed. For example, a customer might say, "I like this type of product, but I'm always worried about after-sales service." This response reveals a sales opportunity based on support, not necessarily price, something that can only be discovered by listening carefully. A real-life case that demonstrates the power of listening before selling is that of a financial advisor who managed to double his contract closings simply by changing his sales approach. Previously, he used to present all his products from the first contact, explaining technical features and complex figures. After training in active listening, he began dedicating the first meetings solely to listening to his clients, asking about their goals, concerns, and dreams. With this information, he customized his proposal to precisely address their expressed needs. The result was a significant increase in the closing rate and a noticeable improvement in client satisfaction, who perceived him more as an ally than a salesperson. The emotional effect of listening is so powerful that it can transform perceptions of price and value. A customer who feels deeply understood by the salesperson is often more willing to pay a higher price because they perceive they are getting a tailored solution, not a generic product. This has a psychological explanation. Active listening builds trust, and trust reduces uncertainty, which is one of the main reasons customers hesitate to buy. However, listening more doesn't mean staying silent all the time. After listening and understanding, the salesperson must connect the information obtained with the appropriate proposal. This creates a powerful emotional bridge. Based on what you told me about your need to optimize your team's time and reduce errors, this software with advanced automation can solve exactly those problems, and it also has 24/7 technical support so you're never alone. This type of pitch doesn't come from memorizing a script, but from listening first and tailoring the solution to each client's unique needs. Active listening also has a long-term positive effect. Loyalty. A customer who feels heard and understood not only buys once, but returns. They also tend to recommend the business to others because they perceive the unique and personalized service. In saturated markets, where products can be very similar among competitors, the quality of the listening experience can be the key difference that turns an ordinary business into an extraordinary one. Therefore, listening more is not just a sales technique, but a change of mindset. It means prioritizing the customer, understanding their emotions and real needs, and building a relationship based on trust. A salesperson who develops the skill of active listening becomes a problem solver rather than a mere product promoter, and this shift in approach is what makes the difference between selling sporadically and building a solid base of loyal and satisfied customers. Technique 8. Body language that closes sales. Body language is a silent but extremely powerful tool in sales, as it conveys messages even when not a single word is spoken. Our brains are wired to unconsciously interpret nonverbal cues. In fact, in many cases, we rely more on what we perceive from a person's body than on what they are actually saying. A customer may forget the exact words used during a conversation, but they will hardly ever forget how they felt during that interaction. That feeling is largely determined by the salesperson's tone of voice, posture, gestures, and facial expression. Therefore, understanding and controlling body language is not only a competitive advantage, but a necessity if you want to consistently close more sales. One of the most influential elements of body language is posture. An upright posture, with shoulders back and chest open, conveys confidence and security, while a slouched posture gives an impression of insecurity or lack of interest. When a salesperson presents themselves in a confident yet relaxed manner, the customer immediately senses that they are in front of someone who is in control of what they do and, at the same time, approachable. It's not about overdoing it with military rigidity, but rather finding a balance where the body communicates openness and professionalism. For example, when standing in front of a customer, keeping your feet slightly apart and your hands visible, never hidden in your pockets, generates a sense of transparency and willingness to help. Eye contact is another key component. Natural eye contact, without appearing intimidating or evasive, generates an instant emotional connection. A lack of eye contact can be interpreted as a lack of confidence or, worse, as dishonesty. Instead, looking intently while the customer is speaking reinforces the feeling that their words matter and that the salesperson is genuinely interested in what they're saying. A simple but effective trick is to maintain eye contact about 60% of the time during a conversation, alternating moments of direct contact with natural pauses to avoid appearing challenging. Hand gestures also play a key role. Using your hands in an open and controlled manner conveys sincerity and enthusiasm. Gentle gestures that accompany your speech, such as pointing at a product while describing it or opening your palms to emphasize a proposal, make your verbal message more impactful. Conversely, crossing your arms, nervously playing with a pen, or aggressively pointing a finger can create an emotional barrier for the customer. The human brain instinctively interprets these signals. Crossed arms are often perceived as defensive, while forceful pointing can be perceived as confrontational. The tone of voice is equally decisive. A warm, firm, and calm tone generates confidence and authority without sounding aggressive. If the tone is too monotonous, The customer may become bored or lose interest, while an excessively high pitch can generate discomfort or make it seem as if the salesperson is trying to unnaturally dominate the conversation. Knowing how to modulate your voice allows you to convey enthusiasm when talking about the product's benefits and serenity when addressing an objection, creating an emotional balance that makes the customer feel comfortable and heard. A clear example is when explaining an important promotion. Speaking with a more energetic tone and slightly raising your intonation at the end can increase the customer's interest without seeming like a sales pressure. Physical distance also sends powerful messages. Invading a customer's personal space can generate discomfort and rejection, while standing too far away can be perceived as disinterest. The sweet spot is typically between 3 and 5 feet in a standing conversation, adjusting according to culture and context. In seated conversations, leaning slightly forward while the customer is speaking communicates attention and interest, but leaning too far forward can be perceived as invasive. Knowing how to gauge this distance naturally makes the customer feel safe and willing to open up more during the conversation. Another crucial aspect is synchronizing your body language with the clients. This doesn't mean exaggeratedly imitating their movements, but rather subtly mirroring their rhythm and energy. For example, if the client speaks calmly and maintains a relaxed posture, it's advisable to slow down your gestures and adopt a similar tone. This technique, known as mirroring, creates a sense of unconscious attunement, making the client feel more understood and confident. People tend to feel more comfortable with those they perceive as similar to them, and mirroring is an effective way to generate that feeling without the need for words. There are also body language cues that should be avoided at all costs, as they can destroy a good impression in seconds. These include rolling your eyes, constantly looking at your watch, audibly sighing, impatiently tapping your fingers, or adopting facial expressions of boredom or annoyance. These gestures, although often unconscious, convey disinterest or disrespect toward the customer. Therefore, developing self-awareness about your own body language is essential to detect and correct negative habits before they affect the customer interaction. The deliberate practice of body language in sales has a direct impact on results. A study conducted by Harvard University showed that professionals who accompanied their verbal communication with congruent body language achieved closing rates up to 30% higher than those who maintained neutral or incongruent body language. This is because the customer perceives the consistency between what is said and what is physically conveyed as a sign of honesty and confidence, fundamental elements for building trust. An interesting case study is in the real estate sector. A real estate agent decided to work on his body language because he noticed that, despite his detailed presentations, many clients weren't closing the deal. By receiving specific training, he improved his posture, learned to use open gestures when pointing out property features, and adopted a warmer tone of voice when explaining the benefits. The result was a significant increase in his closing rate in less than 6 months. His own clients commented that they felt more comfortable and confident during the showings, demonstrating that body language is even more influential than the technical information presented. Ultimately, the body communicates constantly, whether we like it or not. Learning to control and enhance this silent language turns every interaction into an opportunity to build trust, convey confidence, and naturally persuade. A salesperson who masters posture, eye contact, gestures, and tone of voice has a clear advantage over the competition because they connect emotionally with the customer and guide them toward a purchase decision without it feeling forced. And this ability to create a positive and authentic experience, without relying solely on words, is what turns a sale into the beginning of a lasting relationship with the customer. Technique 9. The curve of emotion and history. Emotions are the hidden driving force behind most purchasing decisions, and storytelling is the tool that allows us to channel those emotions effectively. The emotion curve and story technique is based on the understanding that customers don't just buy products or services, but rather experiences, meanings, and sensations. A well-told story, with an emotional structure that rises, falls, and rises again, can create such a powerful connection that the customer not only remembers what they bought, but also how they felt throughout the entire process. This emotional connection is what turns a simple transaction into a memorable experience that generates loyalty and recommendations. Storytelling in sales doesn't mean inventing false or exaggerated stories, but rather presenting the value of what's being offered through a narrative that resonates with the customer. For example, a bicycle salesperson might simply list the technical features of a specific model: aluminum frame, disc brakes, front suspension. But if, instead, they tell the story of a customer who started using that bike to commute and, as a result, improved their health, saved money, and rediscovered the city in a different way, the emotional impact is much greater. The customer doesn't just hear facts. They see themselves reflected in the story and imagine experiencing the same benefits. The emotion curve works because it reflects how our brain processes a story. First, attention is aroused by an initial situation, the customer's context or a common problem. Then emotional tension is generated, the challenge, difficulty, or unmet desire. And finally, a solution is offered that leads to relief and satisfaction, the product or service as the answer. This structure is so effective that it's used in movies, advertising, and motivational speeches because it engages the human mind on a deep level. When a salesperson applies this technique, they aren't just selling. They're guiding the customer on an emotional journey that takes them from a current state to a desired state with the help of what is being offered. For example, an insurance agent might begin with a story about the daily life of a family who, due to an unexpected medical emergency, faced financial hardship. This moment creates an immediate emotional connection because we all know that can happen. The agent then explains how the situation changed thanks to the right coverage, showing the relief and peace of mind they gained. The client doesn't just perceive insurance as a product, but as an emotional shield that protects what they value most. Thus, the product ceases to be a simple policy and becomes a symbol of security and family care. An essential element of using the emotion curve is authenticity. The customer must feel that the story is real, that it has a genuine purpose, and that it's not just a manipulation tactic. This means stories should be based on other customers' real experiences, the company's own history, or even the salesperson's personal experience. For example, a chef who shares how a special recipe was born from an emotional moment with his grandmother creates a stronger connection than simply saying, "This dish has fresh ingredients." The customer feels there's something human behind the offer, something they can emotionally identify with. The use of metaphors can also amplify the impact of a story. A software company, for example, might explain its product by saying, "It's like having an assistant who never sleeps, watching over every detail of your business so you can focus on growing." This image not only informs, but also generates a positive emotional sensation, conveying the idea of security, efficiency, and constant support. Metaphors connect with the customer's visual mind, helping them remember the message and associate it with a specific emotion. A key aspect of storytelling is involving the customer in the story. It's not just about telling something and hoping they'll listen, but rather inviting them to be the protagonist. This is achieved with thought-provoking questions. Can you imagine how your daily life would change if this product saved you 2 hours every day? Or, how would you feel if you knew your investment was protected no matter what? These questions turn the story into a personal experience, where the customer ceases to be a spectator and becomes an active part of the narrative. The impact of this technique goes beyond the moment of the sale. A customer who experiences a memorable emotional experience is much more likely to share it with others. People don't tend to talk about cold transactional purchases, but they do enthusiastically share the stories that move them. "I bought this product because it made me think of my father, who always told me to save time for what's important." Or, "I loved the way I was served. I felt listened to and valued." These experiences generate natural word-of-mouth marketing, one of the most powerful and least expensive tools for any business. A real-life example comes from a watch brand that decided to change its advertising approach. Instead of talking solely about materials, precision, and design, it began telling stories of people wearing its watches on special occasions. A wedding, a first job interview, an important trip. Each ad had a clear emotional narrative. The watch wasn't just an accessory. It was a symbol of life-defining moments. The result was a noticeable increase in sales and, more importantly, in the emotional connection with the brand, which shifted from being perceived as a watchmaker to becoming part of its customer's personal story. The key to the emotion and story curve is understanding that every customer interaction is an opportunity to create a memorable experience, not just a transaction. When a salesperson or business creates a positive and meaningful experience for the customer during the purchasing process, that emotional memory lasts much longer than any discount or promotion. And in a world saturated with information and choices, that emotional connection becomes the ultimate competitive advantage. Technique 10. Coherence and commitment. Consistency and commitment are fundamental psychological principles that directly influence human behavior and, therefore, the sales process. People tend to act in a manner consistent with what they have previously said or done because consistency is perceived as a virtue and a lack of it as a weakness. This internal drive to remain consistent can become a powerful sales tool when used ethically and focused on generating real benefits for the customer. The technique involves guiding the customer through small initial commitments, known as micro-agreements, which prepare them emotionally and rationally to make a larger purchase decision with less resistance. A micro-agreement can be as simple as getting the customer to say yes to a question that reflects an obvious truth or a shared desire. For example, a health product salesperson might start by asking, "Would you like to improve your well-being and feel more energetic throughout the day?" It's hard to get someone to answer no to that question, and by saying yes, the person is already taking the first step toward an internal commitment to the idea of improving their health. This principle is based on behavioral psychology studies that show how people, once they take a verbal or behavioral position, tend to maintain it to avoid the emotional discomfort of contradicting themselves. The strategic use of small commitments can be applied at different stages of the sales process. For example, in real estate, an agent might ask, "Would you agree that living in a quiet and safe place is important to your family?" Upon receiving a yes, the seller can follow up with more specific questions. "Would you like to see properties that meet that standard?" And later, "Would you like us to arrange a showing tomorrow afternoon?" Each statement sets the emotional stage for the final commitment, the decision to buy or rent the property. Another important aspect of this technique is the use of small, physical actions as initial commitments. Something as simple as getting the customer to agree to a demo, sign up for a free trial, or even spend a few minutes answering a survey are examples of micro-agreements that predispose them to future action. A software company, for example, may offer 7-day trial access. By signing up and starting to use the system, the customer has already taken a first step toward commitment. If they perceive value during that period, the likelihood of them making the payment decision increases significantly because their initial behavior, trying the software, creates a momentum of consistency with the subsequent decision, formally purchasing it. Consistency can also be reinforced through the customer's use of language. When the customer expresses a specific desire or need, repeating their own words creates a psychological echo that strengthens commitment. For example, if a customer says, "I'd like to reduce my company's maintenance costs," the salesperson can respond, "Exactly. You're looking to reduce maintenance costs, aren't you? Let me show you how this solution is designed to do just that." This verbal mirroring makes the customer perceive that their own statement supports the proposed action, and accepting the solution becomes a logical extension of their initial commitment. An interesting case study involved a company that sold financial consulting services. Its advisors began implementing micro-agreements at every stage of their meetings. First, they asked for permission to explain the client's business diagnosis, then they sought feedback on the findings, and finally obtained a yes when they asked if the client agreed that improving certain processes was essential. By the time it came to offering the full consulting service, the client had already said yes several times to key concepts, which dramatically reduced resistance to the final commitment. The closing rate increased by 25% in just 3 months of consciously applying this technique. Practical exercises for mastering this skill begin with designing strategic questions that elicit a natural and honest yes from the customer. These questions should be aligned with the buyer's values or aspirations. For example, a technology salesperson can practice phrases like, "Would you agree that the security of your data is essential to your business?" Or, "Would you like to reduce the time your team spends on repetitive tasks?" Validation dynamics can also be designed, such as showing the customer a feature and asking, "Would this solve the problem you mentioned earlier?" Each affirmative response reinforces the customer's internal commitment to the purchase decision. The salesperson's body language also plays a crucial role in this technique. When pursuing a microdeal, it's essential to show openness and empathy. A relaxed posture, appropriate eye contact, and a warm, calm tone of voice help the customer perceive the interaction as genuine, not pressure-based. The goal isn't to manipulate, but rather to guide the customer naturally toward a decision that truly provides value. If the customer perceives the commitment as imposed or forced, the effect can be counterproductive and lead to rejection. Consistency and commitment not only work at the time of sale, but also in the long-term relationship with the customer. For example, after a purchase, commitment can be reinforced with small additional steps, such as inviting the customer to join a loyalty program, completing a short satisfaction survey, or participating in an exclusive community. Each additional action strengthens the emotional bond with the brand and reduces the likelihood of the customer abandoning the product or service, because they feel psychologically consistent with the decision they already made. A clear example of long-term commitment occurs with companies that sell memberships, such as gyms or training academies. When the customer signs an initial contract, They usually have a high level of motivation, but that motivation can diminish over time. To prevent this, many businesses generate ongoing micro-commitments. They invite the customer to set monthly goals, track their progress, and share their achievements on social media. Each micro-agreement reinforces the initial behavior of remaining a member, keeping the commitment alive and sustainable. In conclusion, the consistency and commitment technique leverages a natural principle of human behavior: the need to be consistent with ourselves. When the salesperson leads with strategic questions, elicits small, genuine yes, and builds a sequence of micro-agreements, they not only facilitate the final, big yes of the sale, but also strengthen the relationship with the customer and their long-term satisfaction. This approach isn't about pressuring, but rather about accompanying the customer in their own decision-making process, making them the protagonists of a journey where each step reinforces their confidence in the choice they are about to make. Technique 11. Sensory neuromarketing. Sensory neuromarketing is based on understanding how our senses directly influence purchasing decisions. Although many people believe their purchasing decisions are rational and calculated, the reality is that many of these choices are driven by sensory stimuli that unconsciously trigger emotions and memories. Colors, aromas, sounds, textures, and even the temperature of the environment can tip the balance toward, yes, I'll buy it, or, no, better later. Therefore, businesses that understand and apply sensory principles not only sell more, but also ensure that their customers stay longer, feel comfortable, and remember the experience as something positive and special. Color is one of the most studied and used sensory stimuli in marketing. Each color has a particular psychological effect. For example, red tends to generate a sense of urgency and energy, making it a common color for promotions and discounts. Blue conveys trust and security, which is why it's used by banks and technology companies. Green is associated with health, freshness, and nature, making it ideal for businesses that sell organic food or eco-friendly products. Yellow evokes optimism and attentiveness, while black and gold generate a perception of luxury and exclusivity. A business that consciously selects the colors for its logo, physical store, or website can influence a customer's mood from the first second, even before they interact with the product. Scents also have surprising power. Neuromarketing studies have shown that customers tend to stay longer and spend more money in environments with pleasant, subtle fragrances. A classic example is bakeries and coffee shops, which intentionally release the scent of freshly baked bread or freshly brewed coffee to attract passers-by. Large retail chains have developed their own fragrances, known as olfactory signatures, that their customers automatically associate with the brand. A well-known example is clothing stores that infuse their surroundings with a characteristic aroma, causing customers to subconsciously remember the experience even weeks later. Implementing the right scent in a physical business is not a luxury, but a powerful strategy that silently but effectively influences consumer behavior. Sound is another essential component of sensory neuromarketing. The right music can change a customer's purchasing rhythm. For example, a fast food restaurant may opt for more dynamic, fast-paced music to increase customer turnover, while a high-end clothing store chooses soft, relaxing melodies to encourage a longer stay and more thoughtful purchases. Even volume plays a role. Music that's too loud can generate discomfort and rush the customer to leave, while a moderate volume can create a welcoming atmosphere that encourages leisurely browsing. Research shows that impulse purchases increase when the music matches the audience profile and the type of product offered, creating a multisensory experience consistent with the value proposition. The feel and texture of products also have a huge impact. For example, allowing the customer to touch a product and feel its weight, softness, or durability increases the perception of value. This is because the sense of touch creates a physical connection that transforms an abstract object into something real and desirable. In clothing retail, the ability to try on a garment or feel its fabric before purchasing significantly increases the likelihood of purchase. In e-commerce, where customers cannot touch the product, this limitation is overcome with high-quality images, detailed descriptions of materials, and, in some cases, 3D simulations that offer an indirect visual and sensory experience. The temperature and lighting of the environment also have a direct impact on shopping behavior. A slightly warm environment tends to generate a feeling of comfort and familiarity, while a very cold environment can feel impersonal and hasten the decision to leave. Lighting, meanwhile, can highlight strategic areas of a store, highlight higher-margin products, or create a more intimate and exclusive atmosphere. For example, a jewelry store may use spotlights to make its pieces shine spectacularly, while a supermarket uses bright, bright lighting to convey cleanliness and freshness. A successful example of the use of sensory neuromarketing is that of an international hotel chain that decided to invest in a complete sensory experience. Its lobbies were designed with a unique aroma, a selection of relaxing music adapted to the time of day, and warm lighting that generated a feeling of well-being. The results were surprising. The average length of stay increased, positive reviews increased, and the repeat visit rate significantly improved. Most interesting was that many guests mentioned in surveys that they felt something special upon entering the hotel, even though they couldn't identify exactly what it was. This demonstrates that sensory experiences act subconsciously, creating positive emotions that are difficult to rationalize but easy to associate with the brand. Sensory neuromarketing also plays a crucial role in online sales. Although in a digital environment, customers cannot touch, smell, or hear directly as they can in a physical space, they can intentionally experience visual and auditory stimuli. For example, the use of videos with soft background music, product images in real-life settings, and fluid animations generate pleasant sensations that influence brand perception. Even small details such as the design of purchase buttons, warm colors that call to action, or page loading speed influence the digital sensory experience, directly impacting the conversion rate. Designing a sales environment based on sensory stimuli requires planning and consistency with the brand's identity. It's not about saturating it with bright colors, strong aromas, or loud music, but rather creating a harmonious whole that reinforces the desired experience. If a brand positions itself as eco-friendly, it can opt for natural aromas, earthy colors, and soft sounds of nature. If it positions itself as technological and modern, it can choose metallic tones, a fresh scent, and soft electronic music. The important thing is that each stimulus conveys the same message as the verbal discourse and the business's value proposition. The ethical application of sensory neuromarketing is essential. Its objective should not be to manipulate customers into buying something they don't need, but rather to create an environment that facilitates a pleasant and memorable experience, where the purchasing decision feels natural and satisfying. A well-designed sensory environment not only increases sales but also improves customer satisfaction and loyalty, turning each interaction into a positive memory that is associated with the brand for a long time. Technique 12. The power of personalization. Personalization is one of the most influential factors in modern sales because it makes the customer feel unique, valued, and understood. In a market saturated with generic options and messages, tailoring the pitch, offer, and experience to the characteristics, needs, and desires of each buyer becomes a powerful differentiator. When a customer perceives that the service they receive is tailored specifically for them, the emotional connection is strengthened, and the purchase decision becomes more natural. It's not just about mentioning the customer's name or sending an email with a personalized greeting. It's about understanding their context, their problems, and their aspirations, and communicating the solution in a way that resonates with their unique situation. The foundation of effective personalization is active listening and intelligent information gathering. Every interaction with a client is an opportunity to gather relevant data. Their preferences, their way of communicating, their main challenges, their short and long-term goals. This information allows the salesperson to tailor their proposal and language specifically. For example, a financial advisor who knows their client's goal is to save for their children's education can focus the conversation on safe, long-term investment products, rather than risky short-term options. The client thus perceives that the salesperson is not repeating a standard pitch, but rather offering a solution tailored specifically to their specific case. The use of technology can greatly facilitate personalization. Simple tools like CRM, customer relationship management, allow you to store and organize key information about each customer, such as their purchase history, previous interactions, interests, and satisfaction level. This allows the salesperson to recall important details in future conversations without relying on memory. For example, knowing that a customer preferred a specific product model last year or showed interest in a certain category allows you to anticipate their needs and surprise them with an offer tailored to their history. These types of details build trust, because the customer feels they are not just another number, but someone whose time and preferences are valued. Personalization also involves adapting the tone and style of communication to the customer's profile. Not everyone responds the same way to an enthusiastic and direct pitch. Some prefer a more analytical and measured approach, while others value brevity and immediate clarity. For example, a customer with a technical background may feel more comfortable if presented with concrete data, objective comparisons, and graphics that support the proposal. On the other hand, a customer who values an emotional experience may respond better to stories, evocative images, and more inspiring language. Adjusting the way you communicate doesn't mean losing authenticity. It means recognizing that each customer perceives value differently and adapting the message accordingly. A specific example of successful personalization is found in the online retail sector, where many platforms use algorithms to offer recommendations based on a user's purchasing behavior. For example, if a customer buys a pair of sneakers, the system might suggest high-quality athletic socks or a training backpack. This type of personalization not only increases sales but also improves the user experience, as the store feels like it understands them and makes it easier for them to find what they really need. Although not all businesses have complex algorithms, similar strategies can be implemented with simple observations of purchasing behavior or direct questions to the customer during the interaction. Personalization can also be applied in the post-sale phase. Sending a thank you message mentioning the purchased product and offering tips for its use creates a very positive impression. For example, a technology business that sells phones can send a quick setup guide or recommendations for useful apps. These types of actions are inexpensive, but they create a perception of superior service and increase the likelihood of repeat purchases and loyalty. They also encourage customer feedback, which provides further information for continuing to improve personalized service. The challenge with personalization is to do it in a genuine, unforced way. A common mistake is trying to personalize with irrelevant details or, worse yet, misusing personal data, which can create mistrust. The key is to focus on what's truly important to the customer and use the information respectfully and ethically. For example, a salesperson who mentions sensitive details or insists on aspects the customer doesn't want to share can seem invasive. Effective personalization isn't invasive, it's thoughtful attention. An inspiring example comes from the hospitality sector. A mid-range hotel decided to train its staff to ask each guest, during check-in, the purpose of their trip, business, tourism, a special celebration, etc. With this information, the hotel adjusted small details of the experience. For those celebrating an anniversary, they left a greeting card in the room. For business travelers, they offered priority access to high-speed internet. These seemingly simple details generated a significant increase in guest satisfaction ratings and repeat booking rates. This demonstrates that personalization doesn't depend on budget, but on intention and creativity. Another interesting example is found in the automotive industry, where some dealerships train their salespeople to record information about their customers' lifestyles, whether they have a large family, whether they value fuel efficiency, or whether they are technology lovers. Thanks to this data, each vehicle presentation is tailored to the buyer's priorities. For a family, safety and space features are emphasized, while for a young professional, connectivity and sporty design are highlighted. This practice increases the perception that the recommendation is tailored, which increases the likelihood of closing the deal and strengthens customer trust. Why? The power of personalization lies in making the shopping experience human, unique, and memorable. Instead of offering a generic message, it's about creating a one-on-one dialogue that shows genuine interest in the person on the other end. With simple tools, conscious observation, and an ethical approach, any business can apply personalization to increase sales, improve the customer experience, and build lasting relationships based on trust. In a world where many compete for attention with mass messages, personalized service is what makes the difference and ensures that a customer not only buys once, but also returns and enthusiastically recommends the brand. Technique 13. The psychology of odd and rounded pricing. The psychology of odd and rounded prices is based on how the human mind perceives numbers and how they influence purchasing decisions. Although the difference between $10 and $9.99 is just a cent, the psychological impact is considerable. This occurs because our brains don't process numbers purely mathematically, but rather interpret information quickly and emotionally. When we see $9.99, the unconscious perception is that the price is closer to $9 than to $10, which generates a feeling of savings or a better opportunity. This phenomenon, known as the left digit effect, explains why so many prices end in 0.99 or 0.95 in different industries around the world. This technique dates back to the early 20th century, when some retailers began using prices like 99 cents or $1.99 to give the impression that their products were more affordable. The results were so effective that it quickly caught on and became standard practice. Today, most consumers are accustomed to seeing prices ending in 0.99, and although many are aware of the strategy, their brains still react automatically. This response has to do with cognitive processing. When reading a price from left to right, the first digit generates the strongest mental anchor. Therefore, $9.99 is not perceived as almost $10, but as 9 and something, triggering a lower price bias. Rounded prices, on the other hand, have a different psychological effect. While odd prices, 0.99, 0.95, 0.97, are associated with promotions, discounts, and the perception of economic value, rounded prices, $10, $50, $100, generate feelings of quality, stability, and luxury. A high-end restaurant, for example, rarely uses prices like $19.99 on its menu. Instead, it opts for $20 or even eliminates the currency symbol to focus attention on the experience rather than the cost. In this way, the customer perceives that they are not buying based on price, but on value and status. The choice of using odd or rounded prices depends on the message the brand wants to convey and the behavior of its target audience. A supermarket that competes on low prices uses odd-numbered pricing strategies because its customers seek the feeling of saving with every purchase. In contrast, a jewelry store or luxury hotel prefers rounded prices because their customers associate rounded prices with a premium product and an exclusive experience. This principle can be applied even within the same business with different product lines. The budget line may use odd prices to emphasize affordability, while the premium line uses rounded prices to convey elegance. A practical example can be seen in e-commerce, where platforms often conduct A/B testing to determine which pricing format converts best. In many cases, products priced at $49.99 outperform the same product priced at $50, even if the difference is minimal. Consumer behavior when faced with a single cent may seem irrational, but it has a neurological basis. The brain perceives a lower number and reacts with a more favorable predisposition toward the purchase. This response is intensified when the customer compares prices among competitors and observes that one of them seems cheaper, even if the difference is only symbolic. However, the use of odd-numbered prices shouldn't be automatic. There are contexts in which it can have the opposite effect. For example, in a high-value professional consulting business, a price like $4,999 can give the impression of a sales strategy focused too much on marketing and not on service quality, while a rounded price like $5,000 conveys security and professionalism. In other words, rounded prices work best when the client is looking for trust, simplicity, and status, while odd-numbered prices are most effective when the goal is to emphasize accessibility and competitiveness. Another relevant aspect of price psychology is the use of price endings other than 0.99, such as 0.95 or 0.97. These variations can be used to differentiate product categories or to indicate special promotions. For example, some retail chains use 0.97 endings for clearance sales, generating an implicit signal that the product is on additional discount, while regular prices end in 0.99. This subtle coding, although often not overtly communicated, is perceived by consumers over time, who develop the expectation that certain endings represent a unique opportunity. The perception of value can also be influenced by the visual size and location of the price. In restaurant menus, for example, it has been proven that customers spend more when prices do not include a currency symbol and are discretely aligned, because the brain focuses on the dining experience rather than the cost comparison. Likewise, displaying the price smaller than the product name reduces the perception of spending and increases the willingness to buy. These types of details, although seemingly minimal, are part of the psychological effect of the number accompanying the product. An interesting case was presented by a company that sold annual service packages. Initially, prices were rounded $2,000 per year, and although the conversion rate was acceptable, they decided to experiment with odd-numbered prices, $1,999 per year. The result was a 7% increase in sales closings, demonstrating that, even for higher-value services, the psychological impact of a single dollar could influence the decision. However, when they tried to apply the same format to their premium package, the change had the opposite effect. The perception of exclusivity was reduced and conversion fell by 4%, confirming that context is key in choosing a pricing strategy. In addition to price endings, a similar effect exists with the total number of digits. For example, a price of $1,999 is perceived as more affordable than $2,000 because the former has one less digit at the beginning. This perception is linked to cognitive load. The brain processes a smaller number more quickly and with less effort, even if the difference is minimal. Therefore, some companies prefer to use prices like $999 instead of $1,000, especially for products that compete directly on price. Price psychology also interacts with the payment experience. In contexts where customers pay by credit card or digital payment system, the perceived expense may be lower because there is no direct physical cash transaction. In these cases, odd-numbered prices further enhance their effect, because the customer's mind is already predisposed to perceive the purchase as less painful than if they paid in cash. Therefore, many online retailers are massively adopting the use of 0.99 prices, reinforcing this sense of opportunity. Ultimately, the choice between odd and rounded pricing must align with the brand's overall strategy. It's not just a matter of changing labels, but rather defining the message you want to convey and the experience you want to generate. When you understand customer behavior and consistently apply this technique, you can increase the perception of value, improve competitiveness, and ultimately increase sales without having to significantly reduce prices. Technique 14. Authority and credibility. Authority and credibility are decisive factors that influence buyer behavior. In the world of sales, people tend to trust and follow the recommendations of those they perceive as experts or trusted figures. This principle is deeply rooted in human psychology. When faced with a complex or uncertain decision, we tend to look for external cues that reduce the risk of making a mistake, and one of the most powerful signals is perceived authority. In practical terms, this means that if you manage to position yourself as someone who knows what you're doing and conveys confidence, the customer will not only be more willing to listen to you, but will also be more inclined to accept your recommendation without the need for lengthy persuasion processes. Showing authority isn't about arrogantly boasting about titles or achievements, but rather about naturally building a perception of experience and professionalism. An effective way to do this is by clearly presenting your industry experience, your past results, and your in-depth knowledge of the product or service you offer. For example, a digital marketing consultant can mention that they've worked with companies in different industries, increasing their sales by a specific percentage. This concrete evidence not only supports their claims, but also reduces the client's fear of taking a risk by trusting their recommendation. Authority can also be conveyed through symbols and visual cues. Official certifications, awards, media mentions, or strategic alliances with recognized brands are all elements that instantly elevate the perception of credibility. A business that displays seals of approval, such as Member of the Chamber of Commerce or ISO quality certification, sends a clear message: we have passed standards that endorse what we do. These cues act as mental shortcuts that facilitate the customer's decision by reducing the burden of analyzing every detail of the product. Instead, they trust that if an external authority endorses the company, then it is a safe choice. A fundamental aspect of authority is the personal demeanor of the salesperson or customer service team. Body language, tone of voice, and the way questions are answered greatly influence the perception of credibility. A person who speaks clearly, maintains eye contact, listens attentively before answering, and offers detailed explanations without hesitation automatically generates more trust. Conversely, insecure, evasive, or overly aggressive speech can destroy the perception of authority, even if the company has an impeccable track record. Testimonials from satisfied customers and real success stories are powerful tools for building credibility. When a prospect hears that others have already trusted your product or service and have achieved positive results, it reduces their fear and reinforces the idea that you are a safe option. That's why many brands invest time in collecting written, video, or public testimonials on platforms like social media and review sites. The key is that these testimonials must be authentic and verifiable. Any hint of falsehood can backfire and damage your reputation. Educational content is another effective way to position yourself as an authority in your industry. Publishing articles, guides, webinars, or videos where you share useful knowledge creates a powerful psychological effect. People perceive you as someone who is knowledgeable about the subject and willing to help. For example, a software company that regularly publishes cybersecurity tips not only shows that it understands the market but also demonstrates a commitment to its customers' well-being beyond the immediate transaction. These types of actions build a relationship of trust before the customer has even made a purchasing decision. The guarantee seal is a symbolic yet highly persuasive element. It can be literal, such as a 100% satisfaction guarantee, or 30-day no questions asked return label, or it can be implicit, such as a public promise to meet certain quality standards. This type of signal reduces the customer's perceived risk, which is often the main barrier to closing a sale. When a person feels they can get their money back if the product doesn't live up to the promise, their resistance decreases significantly. Large companies like Amazon have exploited this principle with their easy return policy, leading millions of customers to confidently purchase products they might otherwise have hesitated to buy. It's also important to mention the role of digital presence in building authority and credibility. Today, many customers do their research before making a purchasing decision. They look for reviews, compare options, and check social media. Having a strong online presence, with a professional website, active social media profiles, and quality content, greatly contributes to the perception that you're a trustworthy brand. Even small details, such as visual brand consistency or the speed with which you respond to online inquiries, influence how customers perceive your professionalism. A clear example of authority applied to sales comes from the medical sector. A dentist with a standard office may attract clients, but a dentist who displays visible certifications, has positive online reviews, offers detailed explanations of each procedure, and publishes educational content on dental health automatically generates greater trust. Patients not only choose their services, but are willing to pay more for them because they perceive value backed by their expertise and proven credibility. Authority can also be transferred. Partnering with established brands or recognized industry figures can indirectly boost your credibility. For example, a startup that secures a deal with a renowned company to use its technology or receives a public recommendation from an industry expert gains immediate validation from potential customers. This is due to a psychological principle called authoritative social proof, where we trust something because someone with prestige endorses it. Building authority is a continuous process. It's not enough to showcase past achievements. Credibility must be constantly nurtured. Keeping promises, offering quality after-sales service, maintaining transparent pricing policies, and admitting mistakes when they occur are actions that consolidate reputation. A brand can have the best product on the market, but if it fails to maintain honest communication or delivers inconsistent results, its authority is eroded. Therefore, every customer interaction should be considered an opportunity to reinforce the perception that you are a trustworthy expert who backs up every word with action. Ultimately, when you manage to convey authority and credibility, you not only facilitate the purchasing decision, but also build lasting relationships based on trust. The customer doesn't feel pressured, but rather confident that they're making a decision supported by someone who knows what they're doing and offers clear guarantees. And in a world full of options and advertising noise, that sense of security can be the difference between a customer who hesitates and walks away, and one who says yes with confidence and enthusiasm. Technique 15. The principle of exclusivity. The principle of exclusivity is based on a deeply human desire, to feel that one belongs to a special group, that one has access to something that not everyone can have. This sense of privilege and belonging is so powerful that it can transform a common product into a desired and memorable experience. Brands that successfully implement this principle not only increase their sales, but also generate loyalty and an emotional connection that is difficult to break over time. The key is not to artificially raise prices or create unnecessary barriers, but to design experiences and messages that make customers feel part of a select group, even if the product or service is available to everyone. When a customer perceives they have access to something exclusive, a psychological mechanism related to status and social recognition is activated. People value more things they perceive as scarce or reserved. Therefore, many sales strategies use messages such as limited edition, members only, or early access. These messages not only spark interest but also drive quick action. No one wants to miss out on the opportunity to enjoy something others won't have. The interesting thing is that this principle can be applied without increasing costs, focusing on the experience rather than the product itself. A clear example of exclusivity is found in membership programs. Many companies offer a standard version of their product or service and, at the same time, create a special access level with additional benefits, even if these benefits do not represent a significant cost to the company. For example, a gym may offer a VIP program that includes priority access to classes, personal lockers, and a dedicated customer service line. The customer's perceived experience is one of privilege and differentiation, even if the actual cost of providing these benefits is minimal. The result is a greater willingness to pay more and a sense of belonging to a privileged group. Another approach is exclusive personalization. Treating customers differently, as if they were unique, creates a sense of exclusivity. In practice, this can be achieved with simple gestures. Consistently using their name, remembering their preferences, sending personalized messages with offers tailored specifically to them, or even anticipating their needs. For example, A clothing store that sends a message announcing the arrival of a new collection to a customer who regularly buys that brand creates a special connection. Although the collection will be available to everyone, the customer feels they have early and preferential access. The physical environment and atmosphere can also convey exclusivity without increasing costs. A well-maintained space, with details that convey elegance, can make the customer perceive a premium service even if the product is affordable. For example, a beauty salon can offer complimentary drinks and a carefully decorated environment so the customer feels like they're in an exclusive location without incurring a large additional expense. The same is true for restaurants that reserve special tables for regular customers or send a personalized thank you note at the end of a meal. Small gestures that have a big impact on the emotional experience. A powerful aspect of the exclusivity principle is language. The words you use in your communications determine how the customer perceives your offer. Expressions like, for our best customers, private offer, special invitation, or exclusive reservation generate an immediate sense of belonging. Even when the offer is open to everyone, the fact that it is perceived as a privilege can make the customer feel like they are getting something unique. This strategy is especially effective in digital marketing campaigns, where a simple email subject line that reads, exclusive invitation just for you, can generate significantly higher open and conversion rates. Exclusivity can also be built through community. Brands that manage to create a group of customers who share interests and values generate such a strong sense of belonging that these customers become brand advocates. For example, some technology brands have created closed groups on social media where members receive information before the general public, can interact directly with the company's team, and have access to special events. This doesn't require large investments, but rather a willingness to offer information and special attention in a structured way. An interesting case in point is the luxury automotive sector, where buyers don't just acquire a vehicle, but also the right to belong to a select group. Brands invite customers to exclusive events, offer personalized test drives, and provide differentiated after-sales services. Although this is a high-budget example, the principle can be adapted to any business. A small restaurant can organize a private dinner for its most frequent customers. An e-commerce store can send a surprise gift to those who make their fifth purchase, or a beauty salon can give a VIP card to those who refer new customers. It's important to apply the principle of exclusivity ethically and authentically. Creating a false sense of privilege can generate distrust if the customer perceives the promise is unsubstantiated. For example, advertising a limited edition product that is then always available can destroy brand credibility. Exclusivity must be real, or at least perceived as a genuine effort to offer something special. This doesn't mean you should strictly restrict access, but rather design experiences that make customers feel important and valued. A low-cost but high-impact example is sending personalized thank you messages. A simple email mentioning the customer by name and thanking them for their business can make a huge difference. Another gesture is offering a small, unexpected gift, such as an additional discount or early access to a new product. These actions, although simple, create a deep emotional connection because the customer understands they are receiving a unique treatment. Finally, exclusivity is a powerful driver of loyalty. A customer who feels they belong to a special group not only buys more, but also enthusiastically recommends the brand. The psychology behind this behavior is based on the human need for recognition and social differentiation. If your brand can make each customer feel part of something special without incurring large expenses, you will have created a competitive advantage that is difficult to match. The key is to design messages, experiences, and gestures that communicate that the customer is not just another customer, but a valuable and privileged member of your community, which naturally increases loyalty and multiplies sales. Technique 16. Anticipation and expectation. Anticipation and expectation are powerful tools in sales psychology because they activate one of the most intense human emotions: desire. When a customer senses something new and valuable is about to arrive, their mind focuses on that future experience, generating an emotional connection before the product is even available. This connection paves the way for the purchase to be perceived not as a last-minute, rational decision, but as the culmination of a desire that has been growing over time. In fact, numerous studies show that people enjoy anticipating an experience as much, or even more, than actually experiencing it, and this can be strategically leveraged in any type of business. Generating anticipation begins with intentional communication that sparks curiosity. It's not about revealing every detail right away, but rather building a narrative that invites customers to imagine and project themselves. For example, major technology brands often launch campaigns that show silhouettes of a new device, intriguing phrases like "something big is coming," or small feature previews without fully explaining what they're about. This technique gets customers talking to each other, speculating, and sharing the news, creating a viral effect before the actual launch. But it's not just large companies that can apply this approach. A small restaurant can announce a gastronomic experience that will change the way you enjoy food before introducing a new menu, or a fashion retailer can publish a short video showing snippets of a collection without revealing the full design. A key element for anticipation to work is timing. There must be a period between the first communication and the availability of the product or service, short enough so that interest doesn't fade, but long enough so the desire increases. A campaign that is too long risks boring the customer, while one that is too short prevents the desired conversation from developing. For example, announcing a new product a month in advance can work very well in sectors such as technology or entertainment, while for a seasonal promotion, such as a special weekend discount, a few days of well-managed anticipation are enough. Anticipation is also fueled by gradual information. A common mistake is to reveal all the content in a single message. Instead, it's recommended to release details progressively. For example, a cosmetics company launching a new line of creams might start by showing a video with the phrase, "A revolution for your skin is coming." Then, a few days later, publish a second piece of content with specific information, such as the type of innovative ingredient they will use, and finally show images of the packaging and the launch date. This drip method keeps the customer's attention engaged for longer and strengthens the emotional connection with the product before it hits the market. Generating anticipation depends not only on the message but also on the channel. Social media is one of the most effective ways to build anticipation because it allows for immediate interaction. A business can launch a countdown on Instagram, open an exclusive waitlist, or even allow followers to vote on product features. These types of dynamics make customers feel part of the process and increase their emotional involvement. Additionally, email campaigns with intriguing subject lines like, "Get ready for something unique," or "We're about to surprise you," generate higher open rates because they appeal to natural curiosity. Exclusivity plays an important role in anticipation. When you communicate that a small group of people will have early or preferential access, desire increases. For example, offering a pre-launch for frequent customers or newsletter subscribers turns the experience into something more than a purchase. It feels like a privilege. This doesn't necessarily require a large budget. Simply communicate that a special group will have access before the general public, even if the time difference is minimal. A practical example is a local business that decided to announce a new line of desserts through a week-long teaser campaign. They posted photos on social media with the hashtag something sweet is coming, showing only loose ingredients and hands preparing recipes without revealing the final product. On launch day, in addition to introducing the new desserts, they offered free tastings only to those who had pre-registered via a link. The result was a line of customers before the store even opened and a significant increase in social media mentions. What was sold wasn't just the product, but the experience of being part of the moment. Collaborations can also boost anticipation. A clear example is when a fashion brand partners with a renowned designer for a limited collection. The mere mention of the collaboration generates anticipation because it combines the novelty of the product with the prestige of the collaborator. A small business can replicate this by collaborating with a local influencer, a guest chef, or an artist, announcing the joint experience before its execution. The result is a double effect: anticipation for the novelty and for the union of two brands or talents. An important detail is that expectations must be met or exceeded. Creating a great deal of pre-launch hype and then delivering an average experience can generate the opposite effect, known as post-launch disappointment. Therefore, the campaign must be built on a solid foundation. The product or service must be truly valuable and deliver on the promise implied in the communication. Anticipation creates a higher standard in the customer's mind, and if something inferior is delivered, trust can be eroded. Conversely, when the launch exceeds expectations, it generates an intense satisfaction effect and a greater likelihood of word-of-mouth recommendations. Anticipation can also be applied to recurring launches. For example, a business might create an annual anticipated event, such as a special sale, a seasonal collection, or an exclusive temporary service. Each year, customers know that a unique experience will be available on a specific date, and this keeps their attention throughout the entire product cycle. A good example of this is the strategy of companies like Apple, which generates global anticipation with its new product launches, regardless of whether the changes are radical or minor. Customers not only buy the product, but also eagerly await the event itself. The principle of anticipation and expectation works because it appeals to the customer's imagination. While waiting for the product, the customer idealizes it, projects it into their life, and, in many cases, begins to justify their purchase before making it. This not only increases the likelihood of a sale but also allows for higher prices, as excitement reduces the focus on rational cost analysis. Therefore, when executed well, this technique is not just a marketing strategy, but a powerful psychological resource for creating genuine desire, generating spontaneous conversations, and turning a launch into a memorable event that transcends the simple act of buying. Technique 17. Simplifying the purchasing process. Simplifying the purchasing process is one of the most effective strategies for increasing sales because it eliminates one of the main causes of customer abandonment: friction. Friction in the purchasing process can manifest itself in many ways, from overly long and complex forms to limited payment methods, unnecessary registration processes, or confusing interfaces. Every additional step, every doubt, or every second of waiting can become an obstacle that stops the purchase decision. Therefore, companies that understand the power of simplicity manage to increase conversion not only because they make the process more efficient, but because they convey a pleasant experience that the customer associates with the brand. A basic principle of consumer psychology is that people tend to avoid situations that generate cognitive effort. Purchasing should be an easy, quick, and almost automatic act, not an experience that involves stress or frustration. A classic example of this is online checkout forms. Many businesses lose sales because they force users to create an account before purchasing, ask for unnecessary information, or include too many steps in the checkout process. In contrast, companies that offer guest checkout options or even one-click purchases reduce friction time and, as a result, increase their closing rate. A well-known example is Amazon, which revolutionized e-commerce by implementing its famous one-click ordering, eliminating intermediate steps and turning the purchasing process into an almost instantaneous process. Reducing steps doesn't mean eliminating important processes, but rather streamlining them. For example, if a business needs certain customer information for billing or shipping purposes, they can organize the interface so that it's intuitive and quick to complete. Today's technologies, such as address autocomplete, integrated payment methods like PayPal, Apple Pay, or Google Pay, and social media check-in systems, are powerful tools for simplification. The important thing is that every design decision is focused on making it as easy as possible for the customer to think and do. Fewer clicks, fewer form fields, fewer distractions. Visual design also plays a key role. A cluttered physical store or one with unclear signage can confuse customers and make them feel uncomfortable, just as a website with too much information, unnecessary buttons, or an unfriendly color scheme can lead to abandonment. Therefore, the shopping experience should be intuitive, ensuring the customer knows exactly what to do without having to think too hard. In a physical store, this can be achieved with organized aisles, clear signage, and a logical flow from the entrance to the checkout area. In a digital business, the equivalent is simple navigation, clear action buttons like Buy Now or Add to Cart, and a design that prioritizes the product and price without unnecessary distractions. A practical example of how simplification can impact sales can be seen in fast food companies. Their model is based on ease of access. Clear menus, predefined options, combos designed to prevent customers from overthinking, and quick checkout processes. Everything is designed so that from the moment the customer enters until they receive their product, the minimum amount of time possible passes. The result is an efficient experience that generates repeat purchases and loyalty. The psychology behind this is simple. The easier it is to purchase, the more likely the customer is to return. In service businesses, simplification can mean eliminating unnecessary validation steps, automating appointments, or implementing customer service systems that quickly resolve queries. For example, a clinic that allows customers to schedule a medical appointment in 3 clicks from its website or mobile app reduces customer time and effort, increasing the likelihood that they will choose that clinic over one with more complicated processes. Even in professional services such as consulting, the ease of requesting information, quotes, or electronic payments can make the difference in a customer's decision. Another crucial aspect is the clarity of the information. Often, customers abandon a purchase not because they don't want the product, but because they have unresolved questions. How long does shipping take? What is the return policy? Are there hidden costs? Therefore, simplicity also involves communicating directly and transparently. When a business offers clear information about prices, delivery times, warranties, and conditions from the outset, it reduces uncertainty and, therefore, mental friction for the customer. A simple and well-explained return policy, for example, not only eliminates psychological barriers but also increases overall trust in the brand. User experiences show that, on average, each additional click in a checkout process reduces the conversion rate by a significant percentage. That's why successful e-commerce businesses constantly conduct A/B testing to identify how many steps are actually necessary. Often, eliminating a single form field or intermediate step can immediately increase sales. This isn't limited to digital environments. In physical stores, for example, strategic product placement, fast payment methods, and trained staff to streamline the process have a similar effect. Technology offers modern solutions to simplify things even further. Contactless payments, mobile apps with self-check-in, chatbots that instantly resolve queries, and digital reward systems are all tools that can be integrated to make the shopping experience faster and smoother. Even small details, such as saving customer preferences for future purchases, help make the next transaction easier, thus generating a positive cycle of repeat purchases. The principle of less is more also applies to offer design. When a business presents customers with too many options, it can lead to analysis paralysis, a phenomenon in which people feel overwhelmed and end up choosing nothing. Reducing the number of options visible at the decision point, or structuring them clearly, e.g., basic, intermediate, and premium options, can increase sales by making it easier to choose. This doesn't mean eliminating variety, but rather organizing it in a logical and simplified way so that customers perceive clarity rather than confusion. Why? Simplifying the purchasing process not only facilitates the transaction, but also sends a message of respect for the customer's time and convenience. When a business removes obstacles, offers a clear and direct path, and reduces the effort required to complete a purchase, it is demonstrating that it values its customer experience as much as the product itself. And that perception, beyond immediate ease, builds loyalty and generates recommendations, because customers tend to return to places where they feel comfortable and valued. Technique 18. Emotional post-sale contact. Emotional post-sale contact is one of the most underestimated yet most powerful tools in the world of sales. Many companies focus solely on closing the deal, believing that the process ends once the customer makes payment. However, the customer experience doesn't end there. In fact, it's at that moment that the most important stage of building loyalty, generating repeat purchases, and turning buyers into natural brand promoters begins. The psychology of gratitude and conscious follow-up play a key role, as they trigger a positive feeling toward the company in the customer's mind that goes far beyond the product or service purchased. When a customer receives a call, text, or email after a purchase that isn't intended to upsell them, but simply to thank them and confirm their satisfaction, they feel valued as a person, not just as a transaction. This triggers a positive emotional response because it activates the perception that the company genuinely cares about their well-being. From a psychological perspective, this type of gesture generates what is known as emotional reciprocity. The customer feels compelled to reciprocate this attention, whether by recommending the product, purchasing again, or sharing their experience with others. Emotional after-sales contact doesn't require large investments or complicated campaigns. A simple personalized message can make a huge difference. For example, a food business can send a message after a delivery saying, "We hope you enjoyed your order. Thank you for trusting us. Your satisfaction is our priority." A mechanic shop can call the next day to ask if the vehicle was working properly and if there's anything else they can do for the customer. These gestures aren't intended to sell immediately, but rather to strengthen the relationship and demonstrate commitment to the customer experience. Personalization is key to ensuring this contact is perceived as authentic. A generic message may have a limited impact, but one that mentions the customer's name, the specific product they purchased, or a detail from the previous interaction creates a much greater emotional impact. For example, instead of sending an automated email that says, "Thank you for your purchase," you can personalize the message, "Hi, Anna. Thank you for choosing our natural cosmetics line. How is your new moisturizer working for you? We're here for any questions you may have." These types of details make the customer feel like they're not just another number, but an important person in the business. The timing of contact is also relevant. The best time is usually shortly after the purchase, when the customer's experience is still fresh in their mind. At this stage, Any problems or concerns can be resolved immediately, avoiding dissatisfaction that could lead to a negative opinion. At the same time, following up after a few days or weeks demonstrates that the company's interest is not momentary, but extends beyond the closing of the sale. For example, a car dealership may call the customer 2 days after delivery of the vehicle to check that everything is in order, and then send a message a month later with advice on initial car maintenance. This type of emotional follow-up is also an opportunity to gather valuable information. Asking the customer how their experience was, what could be improved, or what they would like to see in the future not only helps optimize internal processes but also makes the customer feel heard and important. It's crucial, however, that these questions are not perceived as a commercial interrogation, but rather as a genuine interest in offering better service. A practical example is a hotel that, the day after checkout, sends a message saying, "We hope you had a pleasant stay. Was there anything we could improve for your next visit? We greatly appreciate your feedback." This not only leaves a positive impression but also turns feedback into an asset for continuous improvement. Another powerful aspect of emotional post-sale contact is the use of gratitude as a loyalty tool. Saying, "Thank you," seems basic, but many companies forget it or do it mechanically. A genuine expression of gratitude has an immediate effect on a customer's emotional state. When someone feels appreciated, they are more likely to develop an emotional bond with a brand. Therefore, expressing gratitude in a clear, sincere, and, whenever possible, personalized way is a simple yet highly effective strategy. A clear example is an e-commerce store that sends a handwritten note inside the package, signed by the person who prepared the order, thanking them for the purchase. These details, although small, are memorable and generate stories that customers share with their friends or on social media. In the digital age, contact options are varied. Calls, text messages, emails, WhatsApp messages, and even social media interactions. The key is to choose the channel the customer already uses and feels comfortable with. A WhatsApp message can be more personal and direct, while an email can be useful for sending additional information, such as user manuals or recommendations. The important thing is that the contact is timely, relevant, and has a human tone, avoiding the appearance of an automated communication without emotion. Emotional post-sale contact also naturally paves the way for future sales. A satisfied and emotionally connected customer is more receptive to future offers because a relationship of trust already exists. However, it's important not to confuse follow-up with hard selling. The first interaction after a purchase should focus exclusively on the customer's well-being, and only in subsequent contacts, when the relationship has been strengthened, can personalized recommendations be introduced. For example, a spa might call 1 week after a service to thank the customer for the visit and ask how they're feeling, and a month later send a message offering a discount on a complimentary service. A successful case of implementing this technique is that of an appliance company that established a mandatory policy of calling all customers 48 hours after product delivery. The call included a thank you, verification of installation and proper operation, and the availability of a technician in case of any issues. The result was a decrease in complaints, an increase in customer satisfaction, and a higher repeat purchase rate than the competition. The key was the authenticity of the contact and the speed with which any issues detected during that interaction were resolved. The psychology behind emotional post-sale contact is directly related to emotional memory. People don't always remember every detail of a purchase, but they do remember how they felt during the experience. If the customer feels cared for and appreciated after paying, the entire experience takes on a value greater than the product itself. And since most future purchasing decisions are based on past experiences, emotional follow-up becomes a long-term investment that can bring consistent returns. Technique 19. The 80-20 Rule of Persuasion. The 80-20 rule, also known as the Pareto principle, states that approximately 80% of results come from 20% of efforts. In the field of sales and persuasion, this principle becomes a powerful guide because it reveals a reality that many businesses overlook. Not all customers have the same impact on revenue. Identifying and focusing on the 20% of customers who generate the most profit can completely change the way a company organizes its strategies, optimizes its resources, and builds lasting and profitable relationships. This principle has a clear psychological basis. Not all customers value a product or service in the same way, and not all are willing to invest the same amount of money or time. In every market, there are people with a high willingness to pay, a higher level of trust in the brand, and a higher than average purchase frequency. When companies try to persuade everyone equally, they end up diluting their message and dispersing their resources. On the other hand, when they focus their energy on this key group of high-value customers, they can personalize the experience, increase the average ticket, and generate a stronger and more profitable relationship. The first step in applying the 80-20 approach to persuasion is identifying who these strategic customers are. This involves analyzing the sales database and segmenting it according to criteria such as purchase frequency, amount spent, recurrence, and referral potential. For example, a small business may discover that a small group of customers shop weekly and represent 60% of its revenue, while the remaining customers shop sporadically. Once this group is identified, communications, benefits, and offers should prioritize these individuals. It's not about neglecting others, but about recognizing where the true driving force of the business lies. Persuading the top 20% of customers requires differentiated treatment. This group must feel they are receiving something special and that their relationship with the brand goes beyond the transaction. For example, a restaurant can offer exclusive dinners for frequent customers, a gym can create a rewards program for its most committed members, and an e-commerce site can grant early access to new releases to those who purchase most frequently. These gestures not only reinforce the loyalty of the best customers but also generate a powerful psychological effect, a sense of belonging and recognition, which increases the likelihood of continued purchases and even increased consumption. The 80-20 approach also applies to persuasive communication. By identifying the highest value customers, businesses can create more targeted and personalized messages. For example, instead of sending general campaigns to the entire database, direct messages can be designed that speak to the specific interests of this group. This not only increases the effectiveness of the message but also strengthens the relationship because the customer feels the company understands and values them. Personalization, as demonstrated in consumer behavior studies, increases response rates and improves brand perception, turning the best customers into true business ambassadors. Another important aspect is recognizing that not all products or services generate the same profit margin. Often, a small group of products represents the majority of profitability. Therefore, in addition to identifying the best customers, it is essential to identify which products or services are the most profitable and create persuasion strategies focused on them. For example, if a business detects that a premium service represents a high margin and is highly valued by a specific customer segment, it can focus its marketing and sales efforts on offering that service prominently to those who value it most, thus optimizing both profitability and the customer experience. The 80-20 principle can also be applied to the sales team's time and energy. Instead of devoting the same amount of effort to all prospects, you can prioritize those with the greatest potential for repeat purchases or high investment. This means training the team to identify signs of strategic customers from the first contact, adjusting the sales pitch based on their profile, and, above all, establishing more robust follow-up systems for these key customers. This way, you avoid burnout by pursuing low-potential opportunities and increase the closing rate in the segment with the greatest economic impact. A practical example of the 80-20 persuasion principle is found in technology companies that sell software. Many discovered that a small percentage of their enterprise customers accounted for the majority of their revenue. By focusing their efforts on retaining these customers, offering premium support and customized solutions, they not only increased satisfaction but also increased revenue because these customers were willing to pay more for a service tailored to their needs. The result was a much stronger and more profitable long-term relationship than chasing hundreds of small, low-value contracts. The 80-20 psychology of persuasion also teaches that it's easier to upsell a satisfied existing customer than to acquire a new one. Therefore, when identifying the top 20%, the strategy should include specific upselling and cross-selling techniques. For example, if a customer already trusts the brand and makes regular purchases, offering them a complimentary product or an upgraded version has a high probability of success. Furthermore, high-value customers tend to have a lower price resistance threshold because they already perceive the brand as reliable and high quality. It's essential, however, not to neglect the experience of the remaining 80%. While the focus is on the best customers, the goal is to gradually elevate other buyers to that strategic group. For example, a business can identify customers with growth potential, those who buy with moderate frequency, and implement specific strategies to encourage them to increase their consumption, such as personalized promotions, loyalty programs, or exclusive experiences. In this way, the high-value customer base expands sustainably over time. Finally, the 80-20 rule applied to persuasion isn't static. It requires constant review. Today's best customers may not be the same ones a year from now, and consumer preferences may change. Therefore, it's important to constantly monitor sales data and adjust your strategy based on trends. The combination of data analysis, appropriate segmentation, and personalized persuasion techniques allows you to maximize the impact of each sales effort, reducing wasted resources and significantly increasing business profitability. Technique 20. The positive surprise. Positive surprise is one of the most powerful strategies for building strong customer relationships because it generates an immediate and profound emotional impact. In a world where most business interactions follow a predictable pattern, any unexpected gesture that provides additional value stands out and becomes etched in the customer's memory. This experience, known as the wow factor, not only improves brand perception but also increases the likelihood that the customer will spontaneously recommend the business to others. The psychology behind this technique is clear. When something exceeds expectations, the mind perceives it as an emotional gift, which generates gratitude and strengthens the bond with the brand. Giving more than expected doesn't necessarily mean incurring high costs. These are small details that create a positive surprise and convey a message of genuine care. For example, a coffee shop that adds a complimentary artisanal cookie with the order, a clothing store that wraps the product with an elegant and personalized design, or a mechanic who cleans the vehicle after repairs. These are gestures that are unexpected but greatly appreciated by the customer. These details create an experience that goes beyond the product or service purchased, generating a positive memory that is hard to forget. Positive surprise also has a strong emotional component because it triggers a feeling of reciprocity. When someone receives something unexpected and valuable, they feel a natural impulse to reciprocate. In the sales context, this can translate into positive reviews, word-of-mouth recommendations, spontaneous social media posts, or a greater willingness to purchase again. In fact, consumer behavior studies have shown that unexpected positive experiences generate higher levels of satisfaction than those achieved by strictly fulfilling what was promised. A clear example of this technique is seen in e-commerce companies that include handwritten notes thanking customers for their purchase or small surprise gifts in the package. Upon opening the order, the customer not only receives the product they expected, but also an emotional experience that exceeds their expectations. This action not only generates an immediate wow, but also increases the likelihood that the customer will share their experience on social media, generating organic and highly credible advertising. Positive surprises can be classified into two types: tangible and intangible. Tangible surprises are additional objects or benefits that the customer didn't expect, such as a discount on their next purchase, a free sample of a new product, or a small commemorative gift. Intangible surprises, on the other hand, are experiences that generate an emotional impact, such as exceptionally friendly service, a personalized thank you message, or a quick and effective solution to a problem. Both have great potential for building loyalty, but intangible surprises tend to have a lower cost and a longer-lasting emotional impact. It's important to clarify that a positive surprise must be genuine and not perceived as a manipulative trick. If the customer feels the intention is solely to upsell them or impose conditions, the effect can be negative. Therefore, the key is for the surprise to be perceived as a sincere gesture of appreciation. For example, a restaurant that offers a free birthday dessert to a returning customer conveys a clear message of recognition and gratitude, whereas if that same dessert arrives with a forced, "buy now and we'll give you more" pitch, it can lose its emotional impact. Frequency is also a factor to consider. Surprise loses its effectiveness if it becomes routine and expected. Therefore, it's advisable to apply it strategically, choosing key moments or specific customer segments. A business can surprise new customers on their first purchase, loyal customers on anniversaries, or during special dates. Positive surprises can also be used as a customer recovery tool, sending a gift or special message to someone who hasn't purchased in a long time. In the digital realm, positive surprises can be implemented in multiple ways. For example, offering a free upgrade to a subscription service, enabling premium features for a limited time at no additional cost, or sending exclusive content only to existing customers. These gestures reinforce the perception of value and demonstrate that the company is willing to go beyond the basics to offer a unique experience. Even something as simple as a personalized email with a surprise coupon can create a powerful emotional impact if done creatively and sincerely. Positive surprise is also closely linked to problem resolution. When a customer faces an issue and the company responds with a quick, efficient solution and an additional courtesy, the impact can be even more powerful than the original purchase experience. For example, a hotel that apologizes for a room error and, in addition to immediately correcting it, offers a free upgrade or a complimentary dinner turns a negative experience into a positive story that the customer is likely to enthusiastically share. These types of actions transform potential detractors into brand promoters. Another important aspect is the element of surprise as a differentiation tool. In saturated markets, where competitors offer similar products and prices, small, unexpected details become a powerful differentiator. A customer may forget the exact price they paid or the technical details of the product, but they will hardly forget how they felt when they received something unexpectedly positive. This emotional memory translates into brand preference and long-term loyalty. The psychology behind positive surprise is based on the theory of contrast. When expectations are exceeded, the difference between what the customer expected and what they received generates a much more intense emotional response than if the experience had been simply satisfactory. This relates to the concept of customer delight, which goes beyond satisfaction. Delight implies a strong positive emotion that generates commitment and recommendation. Therefore, companies that master this technique not only retain customers, but also turn those customers into active brand advocates. Why? Positive surprise is a strategic tool with a high emotional impact that can be applied to any type of business, regardless of its size or industry. It's not about large investments or radical changes, but rather a shift in mindset, constantly looking for ways to add unexpected value to the customer experience. From a personalized message to a symbolic gift, every gesture counts and can make the difference between an ordinary transaction and a memorable experience that the customer will want to share and repeat. Final conclusion. Creating your own psychological sales system requires integrating the principles studied in a strategic, personalized, and sustainable way. It's not about copying exact formulas, but rather understanding how your customers' minds work and adapting each technique to the reality of your business, your communication style, and the unique experience you wish to offer. Building this system begins with a clear mindset. Selling isn't about manipulation, but rather generating genuine value so that the customer feels the purchase decision is natural, logical, and emotionally satisfying. The first step is to precisely identify your ideal customer. Before applying any persuasion technique, you must know exactly who you're talking to. This involves segmenting your customer base and recognizing patterns. Who buys most frequently? What products do they value most? What problems or desires lead them to seek solutions like yours? A solid psychological sales system is built on real data and observable behaviors. Therefore, investing time in getting to know your audience, through surveys, interviews, social media analysis, or purchasing behavior studies, is essential. Without a clear customer map, any technique will be applied blindly and will lose effectiveness. Once you know your customer, the next step is to design a communication process focused on building trust. The human mind needs to feel secure before making a purchasing decision. This is where principles such as social proof, authority, consistency, and emotional connection come into play. You must craft messages that convey credibility, show tangible results, and connect with your customers' deepest emotions. Their desire to improve, their need to feel valued, their search for risk-free solutions. This isn't achieved with aggressive sales pitches, but with real stories, concrete examples, and authentic gestures that make the customer feel they're making the right decision. The system must also consider the design of the purchasing process from the first contact to the post-sale process. This includes optimizing the experience to eliminate friction, simplifying forms, reducing unnecessary steps, offering multiple payment methods, and ensuring information is clear and accessible. This is where psychology meets user experience. Every point of contact with the customer must be designed to minimize doubts and maximize the sense of control. For example, a well-structured website with clear calls to action, a sales team trained to actively listen and resolve questions immediately, and a follow-up system that confirms every detail of the process generate a seamless experience that reinforces positive customer perception. To build an effective psychological sales system, it's also essential to integrate feedback and continuous improvement mechanisms. Every interaction with the customer is an opportunity to learn. Asking after a purchase about their experience, what they liked, and what could be improved not only demonstrates genuine interest but also provides key data for fine-tuning the system. This feedback allows you to detect patterns. Perhaps a significant percentage of customers value speed of delivery more than packaging, or perhaps the friendliness of the team has more impact than a discount. With this data, you can prioritize efforts and refine your strategy to achieve better results. A differentiating element in your system will be the use of micro-commitments and positive surprises. You don't need to close a large sale from the first contact. You can design a gradual process that begins with small yes, such as signing up for a mailing list, downloading a free guide, or trying a limited edition version of your product. Each of these micro-commitments brings the customer emotionally closer to your brand and reduces resistance to the final purchase. Complementing this with unexpected details, such as a personalized thank you message, a small gift, or an unannounced additional benefit, creates a memorable experience that increases loyalty and referrals. Another key aspect is measuring results. A psychological sales system can't rely solely on intuition. It needs clear metrics to evaluate its effectiveness. These metrics can include conversion rate, average ticket, repeat purchase rate, customer retention, and referrals generated. For example, if you implement an emotional post-sale contact strategy, you can measure the percentage of customers who return after the first follow-up. If you implement the positive surprise technique, you can monitor the impact of reviews and social media mentions. This data allows you to make decisions based on evidence, not assumptions, ensuring sustained and predictable growth. A successful psychological sales system must also be aligned with ethical values. The line between persuasion and manipulation can become blurred if techniques are used without a genuine intention of generating benefits for the client. Therefore, it is important that every tactic applied is based on the win-win principle. The client receives a real solution to their problem or desire, and the business receives fair compensation for the value delivered. Maintaining this philosophy not only avoids reputational issues but also builds lasting relationships based on trust. Finally, implementation should be gradual. It's not about changing everything overnight, but rather introducing improvements step by step, evaluating results, and adjusting. For example, you can start by applying the reciprocity technique with a valuable detail for new customers, while optimizing communication with repeat customers using personalization. Then, add an emotional after-sales follow-up system and, little by little, incorporate the other principles you've learned. Over time, all these elements integrate naturally and form a powerful sales ecosystem that not only generates more revenue but also turns each customer into an ally and promoter of your brand. The result of creating your own psychological sales system is not simply selling more, but selling better, with clear processes, memorable experiences, and strong relationships. When every touchpoint is designed with intention, when every interaction is thought out from the customer's perspective, and when every technique aims to provide genuine value, growth is inevitable. And the best part is that this growth doesn't depend on large budgets, but on a deep understanding of how people think, feel, and make decisions. This knowledge, applied with ethics and strategy, is what turns an ordinary business into an extraordinary one that is sustainable over time. So, if this audiobook inspired you and you're ready to continue delving deeper into your personal growth and inner transformation, I invite you to discover another eye-opening audiobook that will change the way you see the world, your decisions, and your potential. Click here, and I'll see you there.